I just hit the.
All good. I'm here.
Okay. All right. Hey, everyone. I'm joined today with a very special guest, Alexander Macris, also known as Archon, founder of The Escapist. How are you doing today, Archon?
Hey, I'm really good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you prefer Archon or Alex? Or Alexander?
Alex is fine.
Okay. Well, hey, obviously you are the founder of The Escapist, and what made you want to create this media company? What made you want to get involved with games journalism? Were you involved with journalism before that?
Sure, sure. Um, so my first company was called Warcry. It was 1999. We founded it. We got funded in 2000. And the original premise for Warcry was that it was going to be an online game center. We basically mapped out Steam before Steam was a thing, and our pitch was games are going to be digital products with microtransactions and online play, and we want to be the game center for that to happen. And the venture capitalists at the time laughed their asses off at us, told us that games were a box product, that the CEO of EA was a box product expert, nobody was going to be doing digital games, blah, 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 blah. So we weren't able to raise funds, and we had to find some alternative business models. And what we ended up doing was converting the company into two different groups. Um, One became a community network for MMOs called Warcry, and that grew to be quite large. Um, and then the other was a consulting group called Themis Group. And Themis Group did consulting for community management and marketing for media companies that wanted to reach gamers. So from about 2001 to 2005, I was on the design and publishing side. We were buying ads. Our ad agency was the first to ever buy ads on Penny Arcade and PvP Online, for instance. We basically, built that channel as a way to reach gamers. Um, Around 2005, we had done well enough that we had built up a surplus of cash. We had some sponsors, and so we decided we were going to launch our own gaming website. And I wanted it to be like the New Yorker for gamers or Rolling Stone for gamers. I wanted it to be a publication that was going to really take games seriously and treat them as a form of art. And we really wanted it to be pro gamer culture, right? Like it was my love letter to the gamer culture that I had grown up with. So our very first issue, issue one was gaming uber alles, and it was articles about like warning of the dangers ahead as the mainstream enters the gaming space. In the future, gamers will rule the world, things like that.
Okay. So you believe that microtransactions would be the future?
Oh yeah, I saw that coming in 2000.
Well, unfortunately, I think you might have been right, because we're living
Oh
in
yeah,
that
I
world
was
now.
totally right.
Yeah.
I was totally right. Everything, literally everything I predicted came true. I showed my boss at Defy Media, the CEO of Defy Media, the business plan I'd written in 2000. I showed it to him in 2017, and he was convinced I had just written it. Like it was so spot on.
But rather than, sorry if the camera's a little shaky. I'm still trying to get my setup all figured out, um, with the webcam. But it's rather than fight against the microtransaction stuff, you were willing to go along with it for a business model.
I've never seen any reason to fight against microtransactions. No, I don't think they're innately bad. I think it's bad when you take the approach of um, using social engineering to addict people in the way that casinos do. I have a moral issue with that, but I don't have any moral issue with micropayments. I love the fact that if I want to get a cool costume for my character, I can just spend a couple bucks and get a cool costume for my character. And I think that micropayments are literally the only hope for gamers that want AAA games that can appeal to them because they allow publishers to price discriminate. You can actually make a game for core gamers because you know the core gamers will spend lots of money on micropayments. And given how expensive it is to make games now, and given the relatively small number of core gamers, if it wasn't for micropayments, the games would have already degenerated into even more casual, dumbed down product than they have. So I think microtransactions are a good thing.
Well, there are a lot of, well, you say that, but like there's a lot of examples of games not going that route, right? Like Stellar Blade, for instance. They're very famously they announced there's not going to be any microtransactions, and I believe they've stuck with that so far at least. Now maybe that'll change later on, but
Mm,
and of course like there's a lot of indie games too that are very successful that don't have microtransactions.
sure. I'm not saying you have to have microtransactions to be successful. I'm saying I think they're generally a good trend that allows you to price discriminate, and therefore you can cater to the core rather than have to cater to the masses if you want.
So are we? Do you think that there's not able to be successful if they release a $60 game or God now a $70 game, let's say, um, if they don't have these microtransactions and they're trying to appeal to like let's say survival horror fans or stealth fans or whatever, some sort of like niche audience?
Yeah, I mean it's much much harder. I'm not saying it's impossible. Obviously there's always hits, and lightning in the bottle, and things like that, but it's much harder. And in fact, that trend is partly what triggered GamerGate in the first place. I mean, I can explain it to you. Um, when games first began, the cost of making a game was very low. Doom was made by basically five guys in a garage and distributed shareware. And if they sold a copy of Doom to every core gamer in America, they became incredibly rich. The margin was fantastic. As each generation of game came out, the cost to develop games went up, and it went up, and it went up, and it didn't go up linearly, it went up exponentially. Meanwhile, the number of core gamers also went up, but it did not go up exponentially. It couldn't. The human population is limited. It went up linearly. And so we got to a point where it was no longer possible to spend the maximum AAA budget, sell that game only to core gamers, and get rich. You now had to either figure out how to charge more for the games, or you had to figure out how to reach people that weren't core gamers and get them play your game. And this trend became very, very evident in the early 2010s. And we saw it at The Escapist because we saw the games getting dumbed down, and we simultaneously saw that the people that previously used to spend money on ads with us started to say, hey, we're not going to spend ads on you because we need to reach the mainstream. We're spending them on salon.com and yahoo.com and places like, Sports Illustrated. We want to reach mainstream people. We know the core gamers will buy our game, so we're not going to bother with them. And so they started to take the core gamers for granted, and they started to spend less money on the core video game websites. And this happened across the board. So then you start to see cutbacks. The journalists start to get uneasy. While this is happening, the internet comes up with YouTube and streaming, and all of a sudden, and digital demos, and all of a sudden, you don't need to go to a game journalistic website. Um, you don't need to go to a game journalistic website to see what's coming up next. You don't need to go to it to see games being played or live streams. You don't need to go there for videos. So what do you need them for? And it's this crisis of, well, what is game journalism for? That creates this activist mentality among game journalists who decide, well, we're going to become the critics of the entire game industry. And so, whereas when The Escapist launches in 2005, our first issue was defending games against their outside critics. By 2013, game journalism has become criticizing games uh, as the critics.
So you say that you wanted the Escapist to be an advocate for gaming culture?
Always.
What does that mean?
Well, it means that there's been, for many, many years, a distinct culture of gaming. Now, I should be clear, when I use the word gamer, I don't mean everyone who plays games. Not everyone who plays games is a gamer. Not everyone who watches movies is a cinephile. Not everyone who drives cars is a gearhead. A gamer is a games enthusiast. And just like gearheads have their own culture and cinephiles have their own culture, they have their rock stars that they look up to, they have their role models, they have their niche interests, they have their affiliated hobbies. Same thing is true of gaming. Same thing is true of every hobby. You always have enthusiasts, and those people have a different experience of the product than the masses, the mere consumers.
All right. So you said there's an activist mentality among game journalists. What do you mean by that?
I mean, are you asking facetiously? I think you know.
Well, it's my job to. I try to be more of like a neutral interviewer. I
I
was
see.
involved with
I see.
Pro-gamergate, but like,
I see. Well, it's not the activist mentality was not strictly limited to game journalism. Obviously, it's what's taught in journalism schools now. In fact, um, I would say that mentality rises from a general trend of postmodernism in our culture. Um, when we think of the classic era of journalism, of bringing you the facts, well, to bring you the facts requires that I believe in the existence of objective facts, right? To bring you the real story means that I believe that there is such a thing as the real story that is true. Postmodernism, which has been the educating force for 3 generations now of our elites, says there is no such thing as objective facts. There is no such thing as the real story. There are merely competing narratives by different people with different degrees of power. And you, as a journalist, should be an agent of change to bring about progressive good in society through your narratives. And this is what is taught now in journalism school. And this fed into the journalist mentality starting in the mid 2010s. And now we see it everywhere.
So, what's the best evidence you've seen of this? It could be from the Escapist or from other organizations of this postmodern approach to games journalism.
I mean, you're sort of like asking a fish, what's the best evidence of water? We're swimming in it. I mean, I saw the change happen within my own organization in the terms of articles that were pitched to us, the stance people took, um, the positions they took on gamer culture. But I mean, Gamergate is obviously one of the biggest examples of that entire debacle.
Okay, so during Gamergate, well, first off, what was the Escapist's original approach with Gamergate, and then how did that evolve over time?
Well, when things first developed, there was no concept of Gamergate, right?
Mm.
Like that doesn't come until Adam Baldwin coins the term on Twitter. Um, what happened was that there was this scandal of, I forget what they called it, Five Guys Burgers and Fries or something like that, um, where there were allegations by an ex-boyfriend that his girlfriend had slept around and gotten favorable game journalism. And at the time, there was a mailing list called Game Journo Pros that the vast majority of game journalists were on, including the majority of the Escapist staff. And on that mailing list, they decided, the leaders of the mailing list, that is like the senior editors of the largest websites, um, decided to collaborate to suppress that story. They felt it was hateful, and they decided to suppress it. And so not only did they not cover it, they also instructed their community managers to ban and shut down any conversation about it. Greg Tito, who was our editor-in-chief at the time, had an issue with that. Greg, at the time, was kind of a left libertarian. He was a firm believer in free speech, and he felt that this was inappropriate. And he said as much, and this all became public later when all of this leaked. And he said as much. And so, and he reported into me. I was the publisher and general manager, so I was Greg's boss. And he reported into me, and I told him, you did the right thing, and we shouldn't be suppressing this. And so we allowed it to be continued. We'd always allowed to have fairly controversial things be discussed on The Escapist. We had a whole, politics and religion channel, for instance, where people could go at it.
I used to post there
So
actually.
yeah, so we allowed people to go at it. This caused a lot of bad blood from other game journalists. We then did I did a series of interviews with women who worked in game development, and I asked them their opinions on the Gamergate movement. We published that article. I then did a series of interviews with 9 different developers, 3 who were pro Gamergate, 3 who were neutral, 3 who were anti Gamergate. We then published that. And at this point, people were looking for any excuse to come at me. So they made a big deal about the fact that we called the first article, female game developers on Gamergate, and we called the second article game developers on Gamergate, suggesting that the default of the game developers was male. But in fact, the second group had women and men in it, so it was gender mixed. So of course you would use the generic term game developers, whereas the first was strictly female. But as I said, people no longer cared about objective facts. They didn't care about truth. It was just weaving a narrative, and the narrative was that, Gamergate was evil, so therefore anyone who said anything remotely positive about it was evil. They then went after one of the 9 developers, a guy named James Desborough. They went after him, accused him of being a harasser and all these bad things. It was, Jim is a far left British radical, so the idea that he was some sort of right wing
I've interviewed
reactionary
him too.
was
He's great.
was kind of hilarious. So they went after him, and at this point, the pressure really start to get to the escapist editorial staff, because they were coming under constant attack from their colleagues. And I know that that made them very, very unhappy, and many of them had some sharp words for me.
Okay. So Greg Tito, the members of this group, they actually tried to pressure him into
They did.
caving in,
Yeah,
but he didn't.
blatantly attempted to pressure him in an absolutely unethical way. As a journalist, you should not be attempting to pressure other independent journalists in what to do. It was gross and blatant lack of ethics. The general counsel of Defy Media was appalled when he saw it.
And what did were you a part of the Game Journal Pros, and also how do you feel about that sort of mailing group today? Not just the specific
No, I
group,
wasn't.
but the concept
Um,
of them all talking.
I was never on the list. Um, I don't have an issue with the existence of professional lists. They're very common. I have an issue with the underlying philosophy that was behind the list, which is that as a journalist, you should be an agent of change and collaborate with other agents of change to bring about, progressive politics. Um, I don't believe that's the place of journalists, and I certainly don't believe that allegedly independent publications should be secretly collaborating on their stories.
Now, there was a story that the Escapists did run with originally. Zoe Quinn claimed in 2013 that this group of internet people from Wizard Chan, these incels, she claimed that they were harassing her. This story ended up later um, being probably not true, and
Hmm.
the original person at the Escapist who covered the story didn't reach out to the Wizard people for comment, didn't try to verify the story. They just sort of ran with, "Oh, she says it's true. We must believe her." Um,
Right.
then they later issued a retraction and apologized, I believe, to the Wizard Chan community over this.
I mean, they was me. I wrote the apology and the retraction.
Okay.
Yeah. And I also used that as an opportunity to implement. I went to the general media of Defy, or the general counsel of Defy Media, who had acquired the Escapist in 2011. Prior to that, we had been independent. So I went to the general counsel and I said, look, we've got this big scandal on our hands, and I want to use it as an opportunity to do something good for the community. I want to create an ethics and game journalism manifesto, on how we're going to handle all these issues in the future. And he was totally on board. So we co-wrote our new ethical guidelines. We explained how we had breached them in the Wizards uh, debacle and published them.
Now, you mentioned that there was backlash to your articles. Have you suffered on a personal level any sort of reputational harm because of your, I guess, attempt to be fair during the Gamergate saga? Or I guess
Oh yeah.
accurate and ethical?
Um, yeah, of course. I suffered terrible reputational harm. The vast majority of my colleagues that I had known for 12, 13 years, people had given their start in their careers, people I had promoted. They hate me now. They consider me the scum of the earth. They actively badmouth me. My name is banned on Reddit, Old School Renaissance. My name is banned on RPG.net. My name is banned on um, Reddit slash RPGs. Like, yeah, the incredible reputational damage. Now, that said, obviously, I am in fact right wing, and I have been open about that. And so, as our society has become increasingly polarized, um, the the backlash has grown. I would say, and it continued to grow from 2013 till 2020, and then started to die down for a bit, burst back, and then died down again. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm fully canceled.
So why now RPG.net, they openly, or I don't know about openly, but they are super far left. They have a reputation for being very pro
Hmm.
censorship. Um, they also banned the Gamergate discussion, for instance. Well, actually,
Hmm.
that's not entirely accurate. They only allow it if you hate Gamergate. So if you make a
Right. That's
thread
right.
or a post that's saying that they're misogynistic Nazis, then that's okay. But if you make a
Right.
thread saying you disagree with that, then you're banned. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. But why were you banned from RPGs on Reddit?
Oh, I mean, they're run by the same people, basically. That's why. The ostensible reason they gave for the ban is that I had secretly orchestrated a mass brigading of their Reddits in order to promote my game Adventure Conqueror King System 2, which is a lie. I did not do that. I made all of one post on Reddit. I actively asked people not to go fight in my name. You can literally see the screenshots of me saying, "Please don't feel like you need to defend my life choices." But didn't matter. They were just looking for an excuse to fuck me over because they were jealous that Acts 2 did over 300,000 on Kickstarter.
Now, two of the people who have quit or were eliminated from the Escapist. Did they quit? Movie Bob and Jim Sterling, or Stephanie Sterling now. Do you want to talk about what happened? I guess we'll start with Movie Bob first, obviously. Did he leave the organization of his own volition? Was he terminated?
A movie Bob was just laid off. We had, unfortunately, uh, the fallout from. Well, let me take a step back. The Escapist was part of a portfolio of websites, right? Like Defy Media had 50 different websites that it ran. The Escapist was part of a portfolio, and its part of the portfolio was core gamers, right? So they already had fashion sites, they had movie sites, they had casual game sites. Escapist was the core game part of the portfolio. And so, and I kept trying to tell this to the team that was working at the Escapist, like, our job is to cater to the gamers. That is why we exist. That is our place in this portfolio. That is our advertising base. And they, many of them, about half of them, wanted to go down the gamers are dead route. So, unfortunately,
At Defy Media.
the yeah, about half of my game journalist team, yeah, wanted to. So unfortunately, ultimately, the budget got cut because Defy was like, well, this is crazy. Like, we're not going to fund a bunch of people who loathe the audience we want them to reach, and so I had to do cutbacks. So that's how Movie Bob ended up leaving. Let's see. Sterling. What happened with Sterling is that we had a policy, an advertising policy, that was that as the reviewer, as the critic, you were entitled to lambast and slam the hell out of games, give them whatever rating you wanted, be as honest as you wanted to. But you were not allowed to target the personal ethics and, uh, uh, I guess, make ad hominem attacks against the executives that ran game companies. So this game sucks and is 1 star, and here's why. It was fine. Um, Microsoft are evil, scum-sucking villains, and Bill Gates should be taken out and shot. Not fine. Okay. So we ended up securing a very, very large ad deal with Microsoft. And Jim Sterling had been warned multiple times that he needed to stop with the ad hominem attacks. And when he found out that we had an ad hominem attack, or that we had a Microsoft deal, he did a post flaming Microsoft, and Microsoft pulled the ad campaign. We lost $1 million on that. I told Jim that could never happen again, and he told me to fuck off. I can't hear you.
Sorry. How do you feel about Microsoft from an ethical standpoint? Um, Basically telling you, hey, look, we don't like that we got flamed in this article, and therefore they're
Mm-hmm.
going to pull the ads, and then you essentially telling Sterling in that case, hey, look, don't talk about this. Do you feel like that was Microsoft having an undue pressure or influence over you, or
No, I mean, look, a media website is about something, right? The existence of a media website is not this universalistic platform where every journalist gets to, jerk off to whatever is on his mind that day. Okay. If you're running a sports website, then it's about sports. If you're running a game website, then it's about games. Okay. And we had pretty clear rules, like, these are the topics we talk about, these are the topics we don't talk about. If you want to talk about these topics, you do it on your own. You can go on your Twitter and talk about them. We didn't, censor anybody's social media, but you don't talk about them on our official website where we publish our content. He broke those rules. I mean, if I was Microsoft, I would have done the same thing. Why am I going to invest money in supporting a website that's filled with people who hate me?
So if it's them, what was the flame post exactly? I guess.
I don't even remember. It was
Okay.
um, something about their business practices. I mean, it's been 11 years, so I don't remember.
Well, was it like a civil take? Like not a civil. I don't think you have to be civil as a journalist. But like, was it just like a
I
in-depth
do.
takedown?
I
Um.
do think you have to be civil.
Oh well, we can talk about that in a second. Because you.
I'm never uncivil. I haven't like you can look at everything I've ever said on the internet. I'm never uncivil. There's never really any reason to be uncivil. I think it's a degeneration of our society that we think it is.
Well, maybe civil is not like I don't think you should harass people.
Hmm.
Um, but and I don't think that you should. I think you should take into account the perspectives of a wide number of people, like in a pluralistic approach. And I think that's part of what you should do as a journalist. Um, but hmm, I guess what I mean as civil is I don't think you should have to like sugarcoat things. I think you should just speak the truth. That's what I mean by
Yeah,
civil.
speaking the
But
truth,
that's
but
that's not being that's not throwing a bomb at people and making stuff up or being unethical, right?
or being hyperbolic or inflammatory, yeah, which the media does constantly. So
Yeah, I think I would agree. Yeah. Um, so yeah, maybe civil's fine. But if he's criticizing their business practice, like that's a valid thing for a journalist to do. Probably an
sure,
important.
if he's working for Fortune or Forbes, he's welcome to.
Do you,
But the escapist isn't in the business of criticizing people's business practices any more so than if I'm running a sports site about awesome football quarterbacks, I don't want you to publish articles about corruption in NFL management. Off topic. It's not what we're there to do. We are a business. We have a mission. We carry out that mission. If you want to write other stuff, go write it on your own time.
do you do you think there's value in that kind of critiques of like let's
Yes, there
say
is.
now one of the people, Movie Bob, he later kind of lost it a little bit, you could say. He had this quote that's famous now, infamous now, I guess you could say. There's almost no bad actions, only bad targets. Where
Hmm.
he essentially justified almost any action against people he doesn't like and people who he
Hmm.
disagrees with. Do you have any thoughts on him saying that?
I mean, he was just saying what most of the far left believes. I mean, I wouldn't single him out as being unusual for thinking that. We see it every day.
Do you want to talk about your relationship with these two individuals since they left the company?
Oh, I haven't had any. Yeah.
So,
I mean, I wish them both well. You know, apart from the one incident with Sterling near the end of his time, I had a perfectly nice relationship with him the whole time, with them the whole time.
okay. Now, uh, recently there was six
You
months
see what
ago
I
or
mean
so.
about civil?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I operate the same way, or maybe I don't think I've ever actually. Well, not in the past like decade or the past few years. Since I came back, I don't think I've ever been on civil with anybody. Except for the one time with Ninetales, and I actually apologized to her because I crossed the line in the middle of a debate.
Mm,
I got a little heated,
yeah,
and I I said something I shouldn't have, and I apologized.
sure,
And she
sure.
was, I
I'm
guess,
sure.
cool with it.
I mean, I've gotten
Yeah.
heated from time to time, but there's a difference between heated in a moment of debate and then hitting send on a blog that that you've spent hours working on, right? Like one is forgivable, one is not.
Is there a specific incident you're referring to?
No.
So about 6 months ago, um, several employees left the Escapist,
Mm-hmm.
and they were upset because they felt like one of their colleagues was being treated unfairly,
Mm-hmm.
and they created their own organization, Second Wind. Um,
Mm-hmm.
this was after you left, right? You're not with the you
Yeah,
weren't
long
you
after I
weren't
left.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to talk about regarding that situation?
I mean, the only thing I would say is that I always found Yancey Kroshaw to be a man of upstanding ethics. So if he thought that there were ethical problems, then there probably were.
And it's worth pointing out that Yahtzee stood with the organization during this period of backlash when you decided to be fair to Gamergate.
Yeah, he did. He did. Yachts and I always had a perfectly good professional relationship. I mean, I sponsored him for his visa to move to the United States, so I've never had any ill will towards him. And he was virtually the perfect talent the whole time I was at Escapist. Like, delivered his A game every week without missing a deadline. Brought great traffic. Got out there to be active about his stuff. Promoted the brand. Came to the expos. I mean, I literally don't think you could have had a better star for the Escapist than Yahtzee. So I was sad to see that he decided he needed to leave the Escapist, but I'm sure if he did it for very serious reasons.
Yeah, I've actually I'm not as familiar with his work as a lot of people are, but I've he's obviously been a major player in the gaming industry for well over a decade at this point, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone say a single negative thing about him. So, which is rare actually
Yeah, no.
in this industry. Um, all right, so we also have some more games. First off, is there anything else you want to say about your time with the Escapist?
I mean, I could say so much.
Hey,
Um,
go
yeah,
ahead.
I mean, do we want to talk about the whole gamers are dead movement?
Well, I was going to. So I know that you have. Oh, look at that! It's getting better. The light is. Um, but I know we were going to talk about that. I was going to. I know that. Okay, let me just ask you straight up because how do you want to approach the question list? Do you?
Oh, you just whatever you want to do is fine, man.
Because I know that you
I'm
said you
listening.
don't want to go for 4 hours. You're that's a long time. I understand.
Yeah,
Um,
let's just dive in, and we'll go as far
okay.
as we can. And you'll see when my introvert energy battery depletes, you'll watch like my face ages 50 years, and be like, oh, I guess he's pretty tired. So, you know,
Okay. Well, one of the
right now I'm maintaining my peppiness with coffee.
nothing wrong with that. So, before we jump into the main question list, and I'll reword some things based on your experience, because obviously you're not just like a Gamergate supporter. You're the founder of the Escapist, and an editor
Sure,
and a journalist. It's a different role than most of the people I interview. Though I've interviewed other journalists too.
sure,
Um,
sure.
so recently, IGN bought the Gamer Network, and that includes Rock Paper Shotgun, Eurogamer,
Mhm,
VG247, GamesIndustry.biz, Dicebreaker, as well as partial stakes in Nintendo Life and Digital Foundry.
mhm.
So people have raised concerns about the consolidation of all these different companies. Well, I guess essentially these two major companies merging together, IGN and the Gamer Network, which has a lot of subsidiaries. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, it goes back to what I said earlier, right? The writing was clear circa 2012 that game journalism was endangered because the core mission of game journalism had previously been, review games, preview games, explain how games work, provide game cheats, all these things. And now there were so many better ways to get that information. And you didn't need to pick up, the demo disc in PC Gamer and read their article, right? Like you just watch a guy on Twitch or, download the demo on Steam or whatever, right? So game journalism's been endangered for over a decade now. And when you start to see a media space that's at risk, what always happens is consolidation, consolidation. And so that's what we're happening now. They need to have more scale in order to be able to maintain the interest in advertisers and subscribers. And if they don't have it, they'll lose money and they'll go out of business.
Do you so you say this was known in 2012.
I mean, it's known to me.
Is there nothing that could have been done to
Is
save
there
the
nothing
industry?
that could have been done? Um, I think I think ultimately no. I mean, that's why I've never started another game journalistic enterprise.
What do you think of like worker cooperatives like Aftermath, where they're supposedly owned by their employees? Is that like a possible model?
I mean, the ownership doesn't really matter, right? Like whether or not Bob the venture capitalist or Steve the journalist owns the website. Either it's making enough money to pay their salaries or it's not. I mean, when we started the Escapist, ad rates were so high we could pay 25 cents a word to our game journalists. Nobody gets 25 cents a word anymore for writing on the internet. Like, just doesn't happen. So I think what's happened is that most of the best talent has moved on to Substack or Patreon or their own thing, and we've got like this kind of distributed model of patron-supported content creators who are independent of the need for advertising, and they're independent of the need for big sites. And I think it's going to stay that way.
You mentioned civility earlier, and I like the way you
Mm-hmm.
talked about that. But it's interesting because I remember being a kid, I would watch like X Play, and Adam Sessler was notoriously uh, uncivil, I guess you could say. But people
Mm-hmm.
thought, okay, it's an act, right? It's comedy, and I think that I
Mm-hmm.
think if you're a comedian, it's different. But people later learned that in real life, it's not just an act. He really is an asshole to people.
Is
Like,
he?
well, I mean,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, to Gamergate people especially. But he also advocated for tracking people down and doxing them at a convention. Yeah.
Kind of unpleasant.
But like I remember that like that was I guess I remember his show at least. He promotes this sort of it was with him and Morgan Webb, but he promoted this sort of like I don't know if you call it like toxic culture or whatever, but like he promoted himself as being like a macho asshole,
Mm-hmm.
and then the and everyone takes it as a joke, or a lot of people took it as a joke at the time, and then 5, 10 years later, you see things like the Gamers Are Dead articles, you see things where a lot of these people are advocating for excluding other people from the Overton window and from their circle of
Mm-hmm.
concern. People like you, I guess, and people like me.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, do we think that there's a connection between like the culture that was being promoted by people like that, or shows like that? You don't have to name any specific individuals, but like, and
No, I don't think so. I think it was two different issues. Is one, as I said, the advertisers and people who paid for game journalism were increasingly less interested in spending money to reach gamers and more interested in spending money to reach the mainstream. Um, Game journalists were having less success trying to talk to core gamers and were benefiting from the algorithms on social media that when people got angry, things would go viral. So there was an algorithmic incentive to make content that pissed as many people off as possible, was as inflammatory as possible. And then finally, we had, the tail end of a 70-year trend towards a postmodern rejection of the idea of objective truth and the idea that journalism should attempt to convey that truth. And it's those three things that combine together to create Gamergate. It has nothing to do with toxic gamer culture. I ran feminist websites, I ran fashion websites, I ran mommy blogging websites, I ran men's lifestyle, casual game. Gamers were not even on the top 5 most toxic communities. You want to see toxicity, you go onto a mommy blog.
so this is a little bit off topic, but I told you we'd talk about it. Recently, this project SETI, CETI, they announced their findings, and there was a conference, or a meeting rather, at MIT to discuss it as well, um,
Mm-hmm.
where cetaceans, sperm whales specifically, it appears that they might have language. They've run an
Mm.
AI algorithm over to they've collected a
Right.
large amount of data regarding whale songs, sperm whale songs, and then they've also run this through an AI, and they seem to indicate, so far at least, that it looks like sperm whales might possess language.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there just needs to be
Mm-hmm.
more research into this area, and to study it and possibly decipher it if there's something there, and to verify the results, right? But what do
Mm-hmm.
you have? What do you think of this so far? These findings?
Um, I think they make sense. Uh, Cetaceans have some of the largest brains in the animal kingdom. They have complex social organization. They have long lives. We've long known they have vocalizations. My sense is that for many years we've misled ourselves. with regard to our belief in the qualitative specialness of humanity. Like it used to be said, man was the only animal that used tools. Well, it turned out that's not true. Lots of animals use tools, you know. So I wouldn't at all be surprised to discover that other animals have language, right? Like we know that elephants recognize themselves in the mirror. They can make art. They hold burial ceremonies for their dead. They mourn the loss of friends and family. Like, would we be surprised to find out that elephants have a little bit of communication ability in some range we can't hear? I wouldn't be surprised. But I'm not at all surprised by it. It confirms what I think, which is that the animal kingdom is much more intelligent and much closer to us than we might like to think.
Well, there's a lot of the implications both of your statement and of this specific study are quite vast. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess speaking, let's take one of them really quick, like the political angle, right? So if let's say it's elephants or let's say it's sperm whales or let's say it's whatever, right? If we
Hmm.
do discover that there's another intelligent species on this planet, how are we going to like politically and socially interact with them?
I mean, well,
Or how should we?
if human history is any testimony to how we'll do it, we'll exterminate them.
Do you think we'll exterminate the sperm whales if we find out? If it's confirmed?
I, I mean, at one point, humanity coexisted with Neanderthals, Denisovans, hobbits, all sorts of other sapient primates. They're all dead. We're here. We don't seem to like to play nice with other intelligent species, so I would not at all be surprised if we ended up exterminating any species we encountered that were sapient. I don't think we should. I think that's kind of unpleasant of us, but historically, that's what we've done over and over.
Though also I think that humans also have socially evolved at least, if not biologically,
Have
to a
we?
large degree to include more and more groups of people, right? We used to have slaves. We don't do that anymore. We used to treat a lot of different ethnic
Who's who,
minorities and women
who's
poorly.
the we, Kimasabi? There's more slaves today than at any time in human history.
That's because there's more people today than in human history.
Yeah,
But like
we
the
didn't
the
eliminate
vast
slavery.
majority of
It's worldwide. You know, there's slaves all over the place. You know, there's horrible murder and mayhem happening all over the world. People
I,
getting butchered in war. Like, I don't think we've socially advanced. We're the same.
what do I
We
mean?
just have a
I think
veneer.
humanity has gotten better.
We have flushing toilets. We have a veneer.
No, I think human violence is down actually over time. It hasn't this been studied by like Steven Pinker and people like this. They've actually
Oh yeah, he's shown there's been a recent downturn in violence, but it's only because what's happened is that human violence has tended to become more spiky. So we get rather than constant low grade small wars, you get huge wars like this. And as soon as we have, you know, the next big war, which seems like it could happen at any moment, all his statistics are going to go out the window.
I don't I
You know, he did the test at the moment of the at the tail end of the longest period of peace we've had because we just had the largest war that had ever been fought in history. Like in any other statistical field, people would call bullshit on that. But we want to tell ourselves that we're better.
are we not though? I mean like you say that like oh there's
I
still
don't think so.
slaves everywhere, but like I think the especially in like Western democratic societies, we really have improved
I,
drastically. And also in the developing world too, like poverty's down. I think that a lot of the problems that we faced throughout history were because of this extreme poverty. And then now this has gone away
I
in
mean, a
large
lot
part.
of the reduction in poverty is fake. It's a trick of how they calculate GDP. Because unpaid labor doesn't count towards GDP. So if people do what they used to do before when it was unpaid but a barter economy and they were better off in their small barter economy, but now they get paid, suddenly their GDP goes up even though they're actually worse off. This has been widely studied.
But you
It's
know,
a fraud.
well, I mean, like, I don't, it, I don't think that's true. Like, that's why all these countries are adopting capitalism, like China, for instance,
Oh,
Japan,
China's
South
definitely gotten
Korea,
richer. Absolutely.
but even
Absolutely.
other
South
countries as
Korea's
well,
gotten richer.
like Vietnam. A lot of these countries are adopting
Yes.
they're
Yes.
industrializing.
The Asian tigers are doing great. There's no doubt. The Asian tigers are doing great.
Like,
But
you don't think that
sub-Saharan
African countries
Africa,
are getting better,
not really, no.
like Botswana?
I mean, you can pick a few, but
Or I
no,
mean, like, I think most of them are, right? Like,
I don't see this evidence of progress. No,
okay,
I don't.
well, it's not
I think we're in a dark. I think we're heading into a dark age. Everything's getting worse.
all right. Now, how should we? Now, so you also mentioned one thing. I don't. given our last few minutes, I don't know if this is gonna go interesting, but
Whatever.
the animal kingdom, and thinking about them in different ways. We obviously kill a lot of animals. We eat them. What do you
Hmm.
think about that?
I think they taste good.
Do you think that's something we should try to move beyond and like have like lab grown meat or something? Or
No, no. I mean, I think we should be comfortable with the natural order. I mean, humans evolved to be omnivores with an extensive amount of meat in their diet. Um, you know, most of the species that are most populous on this planet right now are most populous because of us. Like, if it wasn't for us, there'd be vastly fewer dogs, vastly fewer cows, vastly fewer cats, vastly fewer chicken, vastly fewer pigs. Um, and all of those animals in turn evolved in ecosystems that involved eating or being eaten. Uh, Huge amounts of the ecology of plants involve being consumed by animals. Yeah, I think it's this whole notion of, oh, we should have lab grown meat is sick. It's based on a desire to transcend nature, um, and somehow put ourselves separate and above and better than it. And I don't buy it. We're part of nature. We're animals.
so, do you think we should have any concern for the conscious experience of these creatures, the ones in the factory farms, for instance?
Absolutely. I don't eat factory farm meat.
Okay.
I only eat I only eat free range meat, etc.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no need for unnecessary cruelty. Like, I think unnecessary cruelty is an unmitigated evil. It's always terrible. Um, I just also don't lose sleep over the fact that I'm a member of a species that evolved to eat meat. I just am. It's a fact of nature.
Now, the sperm whales, if they are intelligent, like pick another species too. You mentioned elephants, but again, I've seen the studies on this recently on the sperm whale stuff, so I just want to but on the sperm whale stuff, if they are intelligent, should we make like video games for them too? Like, do you think there's a market there?
I think we should give them rights. I think rights should be based on consciousness. So if we can demonstrate that sperm whales are conscious, I think we should extend to them rights. I don't think we will, but I think we should.
Aren't all animals conscious? Or well, most, I should say.
No,
You
I
mean like
think there are degrees of sentience that veer into sapience, and then there are degrees of sentience that do not. I don't think a fish has the same type of consciousness that an elephant does or a whale does. No.
so obviously they should have rights. I agree 1,000%. I talked about that with Peter Coffin too. Actually, we're all three of us are in agreement on this. Hopefully, all of humanity is too. But you're a little bit
It seems
pessimistic on
seems
this.
unlikely.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are countries in Asia where it's a delicacy to take a live octopus and cut it to pieces and eat its still squirming tentacles fresh in your mouth while it's dying on your plate. And they think it's fantastic, and they film videos themselves doing it. Like, right? And octopi are some of the most intelligent creatures in the oceans, capable of problem solving and tool use. Doesn't matter. It's cool. It's a delicacy. We cut off their tentacles and eat them while they're still twitching. That's humanity.
did you see that they're going to be building possibly? There's people protesting against it, so maybe it'll not happen. I don't know. But in Spain, um, they're thinking about doing an octopus farm, a factory
I
farming the
didn't hear
octopi.
that, but there you go. There you go.
But there's people fighting
It,
back.
sure, sure.
I hope they win.
Yeah, I don't think we should be factory farming octopi. I stopped eating octopus when I found out how smart they were.
So did I. Well, I never really ate them to begin with, I guess.
Oh, I did, because my father was Greek, and we used to have a lot of Mediterranean food, and octopus is pretty common in Greek cuisine. You eat it with, like, olive oil and lemon.
Do you think that the economy of the sperm whales is going to be integrated with ours? And what does that look like?
It's not clear that they have an economy.
Well, I guess true. I guess like they'd be integrated into our economy to some extent, right? Like if they have rights, they can presumably start their own businesses and work jobs and stuff, right?
Well, an economy presumes that there is a division of labor caused by the necessity for goods for consumption that are not freely available. And those criteria are met by human beings existing in our world, but whales living under the sea don't have a scarcity of commodities available to them. They just swim around with their mouths and they eat food. So I don't see that they really would have a an economy in the same way we did. If they did, it would have to be something like a service economy where, Bob the whale sings songs so that Jenny the whale will rub on his barnacles.
Right. Well, I mean, when I say like, I mean like, because presumably, like, if they are intelligent, like they're going to once we establish that connection with humans and
Hmm.
them, that ability to communicate, um, they're individuals within that society, and some of those individuals they might want to become a games journalist, right? They might want to become anything, right? And
Sure.
so like it's gonna be a
I would
really
advise them not to become game journalists, man. Stay in the fucking ocean. But
that
whatever.
that's why they went back originally, right? They went on land. They're like,
You
oh,
know, that,
games journalism? No, hell no. They went back in.
that's exactly right. 2 million years later, they have flippers. They're like, I can't even type.
All right. So do you want to tell me about your experience with Gamergate?
I mean, my experience with Gamergate, sure. Um, well, when Gamergate happened, I was not surprised. I had long expected that the culture war was going to spill over into games. I could see it coming. And I said as much at the time. There's like people have screenshotted me saying that. Like, I expected this. This is a culture war. It's here. I also immediately perceived that Gamergate was part of a much larger cultural battle that was happening in the United States. It was not, it was about ethics in game journalism, and it wasn't. And here's what I mean by that. If you have a philosophical presupposition that objective fact exists and that there is such a thing as the real story, then ethics in journalism would mandate that you adhere to objective fact and tell the real story. On the other hand, if you don't believe that, if your philosophical presupposition is that there are only competing narratives between different blocks of power, then ethics in game journalism means that you should use your power to do acts of good for the causes you believe in, and you should have activist journalism. And so the reason that the progressive game journalists never believed the gamers when they said it's about ethics and game journalism is they felt they were ethical. They were the ethical ones. The ethical thing to do was to use their power to promote the cause of social progress in gaming. Whereas to the game journalists had an entirely different, sorry, the gamers had an entirely different philosophical foundation. Um, and so they would say ethics in gaming claim that the game journalists were entirely unethical. And that that is a meta battle that's been happening in our culture for decades now and continues to be waged every day on social media and mass media and politics and philosophy and in the academy. And so Gamergate was essentially um, this battle swamping our hobby like a tidal wave.
Well, it's you mentioned that earlier too. It sounds like you place, and I don't think this is illegitimate to be clear, but it sounds like you place the blame for the culture war on the activist games journalists, not on the gamers.
Um, No, I mean, I wouldn't put it that way at all because I would say, from the point of view of the activist game journalists, the problem was the gamers because the gamers didn't get with the program. They were on the wrong side of history. They didn't wake up and see the systemic racism and misogyny that they had embraced, et cetera, right? So like you can't judge one side or the other as being right or wrong except from within a framework, and the framework you choose is going to determine which side you think is right or wrong. Now, I happen to think gamers were right, but I do so fully acknowledging like these are the metaphysical commitments that get me there, and we can discuss those if you want. But um, but I completely understand why someone who was an activist journalist with deep progressive values would be appalled by what was going on and would be very offended being told that they were not ethical. I get it.
We can discuss your metaphysical views, but first I want to ask, or actually, if you want to talk about it now, you can, but I want to ask you a follow-up too.
I'll ask the follow up. I don't think people really care about metaphysics.
Well, this is, they probably don't care about my question either. So the framework approach, is that necessarily inaccurate? Because I guess you have a framework that you view the world through. I have one as
Hmm.
well. To me, I guess a liberal. I believe in neutral institutions. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in
Hmm.
treating people with equality. I believe in pluralism and hearing out a variety of perspectives in a society that includes everybody, essentially, right? Or as many people as you
Sure.
can, reasonably can.
Sounds
Uh,
very classically liberal to me.
yeah, that's what my views are based on. And so ethics is right, part of that too, right? That of course journalists shouldn't lie. Journalists should be honest. They should try to get the full story. They should hear out both a variety of perspectives, two or more in many cases, right?
Hmm.
And try to get to the truth. But that's
Hmm.
also isn't that also a framework? Like there's nothing objective. There's no like great scorekeeper unless you were religious, right? There's no great scorekeeper who's like this. If you're who's going to strike you down, right, if you don't behave this way.
I mean, reality is the scorekeeper at the end of the day, right? If your worldview is out of sync with reality, you can evade reality for a while, but eventually it will catch up with you. And if something can't go on forever, it will stop.
What do you think is specifically going to stop? What's not real? What's not real?
Oh man, that is a can of worms that would take me a very, 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 very long time to
I wanted to
discuss.
go four
I have
plus hours, so we can if
I,
you
I
want.
have I have a whole blog where I talk about that kind of thing. So yeah. I
Well,
mean, I'll give an example. The Enlightenment was based on the blank slate view of human nature. And it is entirely clear from 50 years of evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology that the blank view of human nature is in total error. Humans are not tabula rasa. We are born into this world with dispositions and gifts that vary based on our genetics. And it is the exact 180-degree opposite of what the Enlightenment framers wanted to believe, Enlightenment founders wanted to believe about human nature's perfectibility. And Thomas Sowell's written an entire book called A Conflict of Visions that shows that if human nature is perfectible, then the logical outcome is to be a left winger because you believe you can continuously improve society by continuously improving human nature and the environment that they're in. And if you believe that human nature is not perfectible because it has innate dispositions, then you should become a right winger because you recognize that the best you can do is make systems that are compatible with the natural order and help everybody muddle through. Like that's Thomas Sowell's most famous book, Conflict of Visions. So that's an example of what I mean when I say that you know one of those two sides is right and one of those two sides is wrong, and eventually reality will tell us which. I
well,
happen to know what I believe.
it's a mix of. I mean, it's always going to be a mix of both, right? There's environmental and genetic things that influence people. I don't think that like anybody
That
would
oh,
dispute
you're
that,
wrong.
right?
You're wrong. No, you're totally wrong.
Well, sorry. I guess there would be some people, but I think that like within like most reasonable
No, there are
people
two
would say
poles.
that.
No, there's two poles. So pole number one is the people like Thomas Sowell who say that there are both genetic and environmental components. And then pole number two is the people who insist that there's only environmental components.
You want to talk about.
And you can read Steve Pinker's book on this. It's called Blank Slate. He's a Harvard
Mhm.
evolutionary psychologist. Wrote a whole book about it and shows that in fact that it's no one says it's all genes. It's the argument is genes and culture versus pure culture.
Do you believe in the race and IQ stuff, and what's your view on that? If you want to talk
What's
about
my
it,
view on what's my view on race and IQ?
yeah.
I mean, my view is that cognitive scientists have studied it closely, and they keep finding an IQ difference between races, with Asians scoring higher, uh, Ashkenazi Jews score very high, whites are at like 100, and then some other ethnicities are lower.
Well, that's the everybody believes that though. Do you think
No,
that?
that's not true at all. That everybody believes that.
Well, no,
In
no,
fact,
I
I mean,
don't. That, what's disputed is like what the cause of it is, right?
mhm. Well, I mean, it is disputed, but we know that IQ in adulthood is 80% hereditary. So, I mean, you can make the case that it's only that 20%. I think that's a difficult case to make.
Do you do you think that black people are less intelligent than white people? Well,
Don't want to talk about
because of genetic
groups
reasons.
and lay out stereotypes. So I judge people as individuals when I interact with them. So
I
I don't know.
didn't want to go there really. I didn't
No,
know this was going
you're
to
welcome
happen,
to go there,
but
but like,
I obviously I have
but
to ask, right? Because I'm like a
no, it's a
journalist
sick.
investigating the story.
It's a
So
sickness. It's a sickness in how we think about the world, right? It's a sickness in how we think about the world. Like we come into this world with a bundle of unique talents and dispositions that we've inherited from our ancestors, right? And then from there, let's be judged on our merits. That's not how our very ill society wants to judge things. They want to put everybody in a box, and then they want to put labels on the box, and they want to assert that some boxes need to be elevated on a crane and other boxes need to be pushed down because the people in those bad boxes are bad. Like that's not how I play.
you mentioned earlier that you don't consider everybody to be a gamer. Well, you kind of already answered that question. I can skip that. Is the term gamer a gendered term for you?
No, my wife's a gamer. I met her because we both like games.
Can you define what Gamergate was?
uh, Gamergate was the manifestation of the American culture war in the game industry.
You don't think it was about ethics?
I think I explained that already. It was about ethics, but both sides thought they were the ethical ones. It's about two competing systems of ethics rather than being about ethical gamers versus unethical game journalists. It's about call it classically liberal gamers versus progressive journalists.
All right, the gamers are dead articles. On August 28th, 2014, 10 competing publications, all 10 competing outlets, all published articles on the same day. These 10 articles were followed by 9 additional articles on other mostly gaming sites over the next few days, which some saw as calling for an end to the gamer identity. What do you think of these articles?
Um, well, first off, I thought they were pretty stupid. Um, it was the equivalent of like Car and Driver magazine publishing an essay that says, you know, gearheads are over because everyone drives cars. It was the height of stupidity. Um, it was a manifestation of the game journalists' outrage at how they were being disrespected by the gamers because they weren't the sort of journalists that the gamers wanted. It was very destructive for the magazines that participated in it, our websites. The vast majority of them had serious traffic declines thereafter. Many went out of business. The ones that prospered didn't get involved. IGN didn't publish the Gamers Are Dead article.
Why do you think they wrote these articles?
I mean, I just said I think they were outraged at the disrespect they were receiving from the gamers. They were outraged at the harassment they were receiving. They were frustrated, and they wanted to prove that they were in the right and they didn't need the gamers. So
Okay. Sorry, I am going to try and skip some of these because I know that we're pressed for time, and I know
yeah,
you've kind of already answered some of them, and some of them aren't really directly relevant for you. Um, if the games press tried to reform or even just ignored ethical questions instead of publishing the Gamers Today articles, do you think it still would have blown up into a big controversy? If they
yeah,
so
yeah, because it was inevitable, right? Because you had a contingent of gamers um, who had something of a hard-nosed worldview um, of reality being real and facts being facts, and it was out of sync with the more progressive elite who felt it was more important to have a progressive narrative, and there was going to be conflict, and there's been conflict in that everywhere. It's all over the place. So there was not going to be any escape from it. What made Gamergate a big deal was not that the tidal wave hit the game industry, it's that the gamers fought back. That was what made it a big deal. It was that the gamers self organized and they made movements about it and campaigns to prevent their intellectual opposition from having an unquestioned victory. Whereas every prior step, that tidal wave had just swamped and they had a complete victory.
so I can understand why the progressive journalists didn't want to just say, hey, look, we made some mistakes. Let's try and fix some errors. But these people work for companies that ostensibly, at least, they only care about money. So why wouldn't the companies be like, hey, look, let's just throw these people a bone, be like, hey, look, we made some mistakes, we're sorry, we're going to do better in the future, and then everybody just goes home. Why not do that?
It's the big lie. It's the big lie, right? That, oh, these companies just care about money. It's totally false. The people in these companies are just as ideological as everybody else these days. I'll give you a personal example. I worked at Defy Media. I was senior vice president, directly reporting to the CEO of Defy Media. Defy Media is a bankrupt company at this point, so whatever NDA I had with them is irrelevant at this point. So I feel I can talk freely. Um, the uh, the CEO put me in charge of an entire division of the company. One of the websites I was given to run was Break.com, which was a men's comedy website. And Break.com had at one time been the flagship of the whole company. The company was called Break Entertainment, but it had been in decline for 5 years. Traffic just declining and declining and declining. So they put me in charge of it. I was kind of the turnaround guy at Defy. And I looked at what was wrong with Break.com, and I saw, the problem is that they moved away from their core audience. Their core audience was like NASCAR fan, hunting, red state, heartland, sports loving, blonde cheerleader loving dudes who drank beer, right? And they were doing content that was more like the sort of stuff you'd find on GQ or Esquire or Upworthy or things like that. And so I said, we're gonna get rid of all that content. We're gonna focus on, it's gonna be, galleries of hot cheerleaders, sports news, true crime news, guns, editorials by ex-military officers, things like that. I built a whole team to source on a 24/7 basis to source viral videos that would appeal to this audience. So it was like a group of 4chan and Reddit junkies in a dark room 24/7 finding viral videos before they went viral, buying the rights to them, uploading them to the site. And it worked. And within 6 months, Break.com was doing more traffic than the whole rest of the company put together. It had reversed all the years of decline. I blew out my numbers, the projections, so badly that they had to pay me a bonus of 100% of my entire income that year. Um, and
Congrats.
so, thank you. So then, at the performance review at the end of the year, the CEO tells me that that my editorial strategy doesn't match with the company's values. And I said, "What are the company's values? Failure?" And he said, they found the audience to be somewhat bigoted and reprehensible. And I'm like, you mean Southern and white? Like, they're just average dudes in America, you know? You just live in this bubble in Los Angeles and you don't realize that this is how the vast majority of America talks and thinks. And they're like, well, we don't like it and we don't want that audience. It's not all about the money. It's not just a lie. They say that to cover up their ideology. And
Well,
that's just one of many, many, many examples I could give.
so you think that like when I
When
guess would this
Disney
apply to
goes,
every
when
company
Disney
or just
when
like
Disney, media companies, you can actually find online. There's tables that'll show you percentage of political donations that go to the different political parties from different industries, like
well that's from the employees who work
banking,
there though, not the shareholders
right?
necessarily, right?
The shareholders don't have a say; it's the employees.
Well, it depends on if it's a publicly traded company. They do have a say. Like they're
No, they
ultimately
don't.
the ones who choose the
No,
CEO, the ones who choose the board of
Vanguard and
directors, right?
Vanguard and Vanguard and BlackRock have a say, right? Because everybody holds their stocks in mutual funds, and the mutual funds, you don't get to vote them. The mutual fund manager votes them. So the vast majority of all companies are controlled by uh, three groups. So it's BlackRock, Vanguard. There's one other whose name is escaping me, and they're all committed to the DEI. They're all committed to those causes. All the CEOs are committed to those causes.
Well, they say
So
that it's to what mitigate risk, right? That like they think that if they appeal to a diverse array of markets, then they're going to make more money because if they only made video games with white people in them, well, there's possibly a market for if they made a video game with a black character, for instance, right? That's what they would say. An untapped market.
they say that, but they don't act like that, right? Right? It's an obvious double standard. Okay, so uh, why is the star of Assassin's Creed black?
Yeah, I don't actually I've never
Right?
played an Assassin's Creed game in my life.
No,
I
I
know that
mean,
people are
like
talking about that recently though.
it's set in Japan. Okay, right? It hasn't made people happy. They haven't reached some new audience of people who's like, oh, I wasn't going to play this game before, but now I am because the main character is black. No. No, they did it for political reasons. They're promoting an ideology, and we just need to wake up to that.
I don't like care though. Like if they want to make the character black though in the game, like it doesn't bother me.
Okay, and it doesn't bother you.
But like I also, I don't think that video games lack diversity really. I
They
think they
don't lack
do in like
diversity.
a sense, right? They do in the sense that like they've gone too far in like the social justice direction, um, to some extent, which is like fine if you want to make games like that. But I think that there's actually, uh, Liana Kursner actually talks about this, and she's a
Hmm.
feminist media critic of all
I know who
people.
Leon is. Yeah,
Yeah, she
we're
talks
friends.
about,
She and I are friends.
we don't get along super well actually on a personal level, which I think is unfortunate because I think she's kind of cool and we've talked before and had great conversations, but she doesn't trust me. It seems. Anyway, she talks about how the brown hair McPonytail she calls it, how like it's how they instead of expanding the role of the different types of women that can exist in games and the types of roles that they can inhabit as female characters, we've kind of
Hmm.
shrunk it down to this super completely inoffensive model basically where everybody you can't have women who are sexualized, you can't have women who are who want to, and there's a lot of women who want to be sexualized, right? There's a lot of women who like that sort of thing, but we've
Sure.
completely cut that off from the market because everybody has to be perfectly PC friendly, and we can't.
Hmm.
It's shrunk down the kinds of art that you can make, rather than expanding it. People like
Right. Which
Sarkeesian, she says
which
specifically, but
which proves that they're lying when they say that they're doing it for market purposes to broaden their appeal. They're lying. Like you just said it. The reason to do it is not because you're broadening your appeal and making more people happy. Because if you were, you would say there's a demographic that likes these characters, there's a demographic that doesn't. We'll have some for both. If our franchise is already reaching that demographic and that's what they love about the franchise, then we'll keep doing it. But they don't.
how responsive to calls for reform? Oh, actually, hang on. Um, has games journalism gotten better?
I have no idea. I haven't paid any attention to it. It's irrelevant to my life.
What kind of reforms would you like to have seen happen?
I mean, there's asking for a reform on gamer journalism is like putting a band-aid on a limb that's been severed. Like the problem is not game journalism. The problem is so much bigger than that. It's a cultural clash, and you know where we are now, in my opinion, is we are similar to Europe after the Protestant Reformation, where you had for a very long period of time there was a stable set of values, the Catholic values that everyone agreed on. Then you have this new Protestant values enter, and they're different. And all of a sudden, Europe goes to war. You have the 30 Years' War, and something like 20% of the population of Germany dies in the 30 Years' War. It's a total war. And they just keep killing each other until eventually, because they both think the other guy is damnable, the other guy is satanic, and they just keep killing each other until eventually they've killed so many people that they're like, you know what, maybe we should just accept each other and tolerate each other. And that's where the Western idealization of the concept of toleration comes from. It comes straight out of 30 Years' War and the absolute bloody massacres of millions of people because we couldn't get along on religion. And so we're like, you know what, we need to learn how to get along. And that lasted for a really long time. But now people have forgotten how to get along. It's my way or the highway. Tolerance is at an all-time low. Partisan divide is at an all-time high. Everything is politicized. The algorithms are tuned to make people angry. The algorithms are tuned to make people hate each other. Um, and so no, there's no reform we're going to do on game journalism that's going to make a difference. We have a really serious social civilizational problem we need to address. Gamergate was just a tiny pimple on the acne of our civilization.
You sent me a picture you wanted me to show. Do you want to show that now, or are we not there yet?
Oh, you can show it now, sure, yeah. That's just the aftermath of the gamers are dead articles.
Okay. So here we have Alexa. So hang on. So this is going from October 2014 till July 2015, or some time after that, I guess.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. So the Escapist goes up and well, how does Alexa measure this stuff? I'm not an expert on this sort of thing.
They used to have like a toolbar, and they approximated it, guesstimated it based on the toolbar. So it was never 100% accurate, but it generally matched the trends we saw in our own traffic data. So I used it to keep track of things. And what it basically showed is that in the aftermath of Gamergate, all the websites that said gamers are dead had a downturn in traffic. We had an upturn in traffic. And I shared it just because people used to say, "Oh, the Escapist screwed itself over with its stance on Gamergate," but that wasn't true at all. The opposite was true.
So Gama Sutra sees like the biggest decline. I guess that makes sense because they wrote two articles, both of which were garbage. The Devin Wilson article and then the Leigh Alexander article. What did you think of Devin Wilson's article, by the way? What do you think of that? How he tried to argue for the making rules for game developers to follow.
I find that an abomination. I think game developers are artists and they should have unlimited artistic freedom.
Sounds pretty base to me.
I mean, I'm a game designer now and I make tabletop games. Someone comes at me and tells me I'm not allowed to make a game the way I want. I tell them to fuck off.
You put Polygon on the list. I don't. Did Polygon make a Gamers Who Did article?
I don't remember, but you can see their traffic went down.
I don't think they did. No, they obviously had a more progressive slant, but
They
they're
did.
open about that. I think that that's fine if you criticize games from a progressive or Christian or whatever perspective.
I think it's fine. You just should admit it,
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
right? Like I've never once in my life have I ever hid the fact that I'm libertarian leaning, right? It's just who I am. My politics are an open book.
So basically, this chart shows that you made the right call in your view.
I mean, it just shows that accusations that siding with the gamers was a business mistake are false. Whether it was the right call, I don't know. I mean, it set my life on a different trajectory, that's for sure. Um, I'm considerably less quote respectable than I was in 2013. Um, Lost a lot of friends, lost a lot of money when I got fully canceled. Um, was it the right decision? I mean, I think it was the right decision because I followed my values and I did what I believed was true and right. But you know,
You say
there's
fully
other measures.
cancel. Sorry, cut you off.
Oh yeah, well, so what happened was after Defy Media gave me a shit performance review for my greatest triumph of my career, I left Defy Media and I got recruited by a wealthy family of investors that wanted me to manage this media star that they had brought, and I was supposed to, bring him into the mainstream and make him a right-wing Bill Maher, and it blew up terribly, and the star got himself canceled, and he got himself so canceled that he took us all down with him, and that was pretty much it for my reputation.
Who is this?
Milo Yiannopoulos.
Yeah. Have you seen what he's been up to lately? He's basically a pray the gay away guy now. Um, anyone?
He and I haven't been in touch in many years, and I don't spend my time fixating on the past. I don't really pay attention to game journalism much anymore. I don't pay attention to most of that stuff anymore. I have other,
Yeah.
I have my projects I work on, and that's what I do.
Do you think it? I know you don't want to focus too much on the past, but I have to ask. Like, was this the biggest mistake you've ever made in your life? The Milo thing?
It's the biggest No, no, I've made bigger mistakes.
What's the bigger mistake? We are gonna get you canceled again, my friend. Don't worry.
Oh, I mean, like the biggest mistake in my life was I stayed with a woman who didn't love me for 7 years. And,
Oh, I'm sorry. You
lost,
didn't have to.
lost.
If it was that personal, I didn't. I shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, like that was 7 years of my life I'll never get back, and at the end I was left a wreck. Like that fucking sucked. That was a mistake. Like, career is career, and I made some judgment calls. Sometimes they worked out, sometimes they didn't. I flew too close to the sun and my wings burned off. It happens, but
What you say that you were canceled because of the Milo thing? Um, like how did that cancel you specifically?
I mean, just try Googling my name and you'll see pretty clearly how it works. So plenty of terrible things said about me. I mean, I had one guy said that because Milo had this whole thing where he was traveling around the country, speaking at college campuses, and so I had one guy assert that we were setting up a terrorist network, that I was personally responsible for the deaths of dozens or hundreds of people. Like that was one of the top search results for my name for a long time.
The top one currently says that you're an alt-right figure.
Yeah.
Are
So,
you?
you know,
Sorry,
yeah,
you
I don't
are?
know what is the alt right at this point. Like I never called myself alt right. Other people have called me alt right. I call myself right wing, but I don't call myself alt right. I
Do you
never have.
believe in liberal democracy?
Like, do I believe in its existence or
Do you
do I
believe
believe
that?
in it?
Do you believe that the United States of America, its current constitutional order, more or less, is right?
I believe that the older constitutional order was correct. I do not believe our current constitutional order is good. I would not call it either liberal or democratic.
In what capacity? Like when you say how far back do you want to go?
I think we need to undo the Federal Reserve. I think we need to entirely abolish it. We need to vastly cut down on the scope of administrative agencies, which have the power to both write law and also adjudicate law, which is gross violation of separation of powers. We need to return to a race-blind, color-blind, sex-blind society that's based on merit. We need to do a lot of stuff. So, yeah.
A lot of stuff that a lot can fall under that umbrella. Um, I'm a political live streamer too, so like I'm a little bit aware of this world. I also used to be an anti-alt-right YouTuber, so I kind of swim in those waters a little bit myself. The
Okay.
anti-alt-right, to be clear.
I didn't even know there was an anti-alt-right YouTube environment. So,
Well, obviously it didn't blow my channel up super big. I got like what, like 1,300 subscribers off it or whatever. So I guess I got something. But
that's great.
um,
Yeah.
well, some of that was Gamergate too, because I was doing both at the same time, pro GG and the anti-alt-right stuff. Um,
Yeah. I
do
mean,
you
if you
you
wanted
know?
to ask me like
Go ahead.
what do I think is the ideal political configuration? So I'm fundamentally an Aristotelian, and what Aristotle argued is that um, governments tend to go through cycles where monarchy degenerates into tyranny, which is then overthrown by aristocracy, which gives way to oligarchy, which is overthrown by democracy, which gives way to mob rule, which then leads to the rise of a new monarch. And he said that in order to avoid that, you should have a mixed constitution where you have democratic elements, monarchic elements, and aristocratic elements. And the founding fathers of the United States implemented that with near perfection, in my opinion. And we basically have blown up their system through bad amendments. So,
Which ones are the bad ones?
direct election of senators was a terrible one. The income tax law was a terrible one. Not an amendment, but a law creating the Federal Reserve has been absolutely destructive to our entire country. Worst thing we ever did. So much.
Yeah, but those aren't spicy opinions. I don't think I didn't call any of
They
those
were.
alt-right.
I never said I was all right.
Yeah, no.
You said that.
No, I said the article, the post on Reddit said that. That's the first Google result when you Google your name, because you challenged me to do so, I guess, so I did.
I'm sure it is. They say all sorts of lies. As I said, they say I'm personally responsible for the deaths of dozens and hundreds of people. You know, they'll say I'm a misogynist, a bigot, a transphobe, Islamophobe. I mean, it was whatever. I'm every
So
phobe, every ist to
let's
them.
just clear it up right now. Now, anyone who sees this interview is going to know it's a lie. Then, you don't believe in a hierarchy based on race or gender, a state
I
enforced
believe in
hierarchy.
a hier- I believe in a hierarchy based on nature. So, what Thomas Jefferson referred to as the natural aristocracy. So,
Well, that wasn't a
I
direct question. That didn't answer my question directly. Do you believe that there should be a state enforced hierarchy based on race or gender?
no,
Okay.
I'm a libertarian. I don't really want the state to do anything. I don't know why libertarians end up getting labeled fascist because we're on the opposite end of the spectrum. So,
Well, this is directly relevant to your career. If you were the editor in chief of a gaming website and some of your employees were accused of ethical violations, how would you have handled the situation?
I would evaluate whether or not they had engaged in ethical violations. And if they hadn't, I would make a statement that they hadn't. And if they had, I would make a statement that they had. And depending on the severity, there would be anywhere from an apology to a termination.
Oh, moving back to the. Don't worry, I'm not gonna try and like grill you or anything. I'm not trying to got you. But
Oh, you've already grilled me, brother.
have I? I feel like
Oh
I've
my
been
God, you've
pretty.
grilled me so much my stove turned on.
I feel like I've been. I don't know. I feel like I haven't really because I could
I'm
have
like
pushed
a
back like.
hamburger over here.
I might have grilled you more than like your average like games journalist interview. But like
Well,
you
they
should have
wouldn't interview me at all.
you should have seen me with Peter Coffin when we talked about communism. That was grilling. Actually, I probably should push back more, but I don't. You know, you deny the racism stuff. And I don't have any reason to think you're lying. So like, probably the Reddit people they lied about you and slandered your career. That sucks. Unless you know you decide with me.
No,
But
no. Here let me actually respond to this. Right, from their perspective, they're not lying. Okay, because they believe that all white people are racist because we have been raised in a society of systematic racism, and that if you deny that, that is evidence of your racism. So the fact that I assert that I am not racist on the basis of my skin color and that I do not believe our society is systematically racist makes me a racist to them. So when they say that I'm a racist, they're not lying from their point of view. They're following their philosophy. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. We have two competing set of philosophical presuppositions in this country, in this world, and they don't play nice with each other.
so you say that because Google your name. So have you lost jobs or job offers or anything like that because of people Googling your name and seeing this Reddit post or things like that?
I mean, I haven't worked for someone else since I left Milo Inc. So, and I certainly put my resume out there a few times. So, sure, I would imagine so. I mean, I've had instances where even in running my own game business, like I haven't been able to get particular licenses um, because I'm, the from the point of view, like if you've got a cool movie brand and you say, well, this guy's a really good game designer, which I am, and I've had some really great success doing tabletop game design. You say, yeah, this guy's a really good game designer, but is it worth the bullshit on Twitter if we work with him? And it's not, right? Like, this is what people don't understand. Cancellation doesn't occur because of the tiny minority. Cancellation occurs because of the majority that themselves don't want to be yelled at by the tiny minority. So the tiny minority, I can block them, whatever, right? Like, I can live my life, they don't bother me, whatever. That's not what causes cancellation. What causes cancellation is the spillover effects. Like, for instance, a guy freelances for me and designs an RPG adventure for my company, and then he suddenly finds himself kicked out of his Discord server because he's doing business with a fascist.
So wait,
Right?
someone, sorry, please repeat that.
Yeah, that actually happened. Yeah.
Someone, please repeat it. I was trying to find the next question I wanted to ask because I'm skipping over some.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm saying, like, I've had a guy who was my freelancer. He wrote an adventure for me. I paid him as a freelancer. Here's your assignment. Thank you for the adventure. I will now publish it. And it was good money for him. It was a great adventure for me. And he got brutally attacked on Discord and forums. He got booted out of some Discord groups he was in because he was working with a fascist. I mean,
So
and this
you say
happens all
that
the time. That's how cancellation works, man.
you say that why do they all think that you're fascist? I know that you because like I know a lot of people have spicy views. I probably have spicy views. People don't usually call me a fascist though.
I would imagine it's because of Milo spillover from Milo, probably.
Well, so shouldn't people in society? So like if I was going to be working with somebody, no offense like to you personally,
Hmm.
but like if I was going to be working with somebody and I wanted to hire somebody for my company, and I found out that they
Sure.
used to be like the campaign manager or whatever of Milo Yiannopoulos, I would immediately be suspicious of that person, right?
Okay.
Now it could be that they've changed and they're not that person anymore, but given that who Milo was,
Who was
even
Milo?
yeah, not just now, but like who Milo was even 5, 10 years ago. Um,
No, who was
I
Milo? I mean, what are you suggesting there?
well, right now he's a Christian nationalist, right? That's his big thing. Um, and he's it's funny too because he's against video games now. If you watch his debate with Destiny, um,
Hmm.
he's actually against video games and he's anti-free speech. He wants to cut people's tongues off and stuff. Like literally, he actually says this in the debate. Um,
Okay.
which like that's free speech. He's allowed to say that. But like I wouldn't like think of this person as like a moral paragon. And I think that people who would like put their career on the line to help him, I think that that would be wrong. And like 10 years ago he was more moderate, um, so it's not really the same thing as who he is today.
It wasn't that he was more moderate. He just had different politics. He was 10 years ago. He was a self-described cultural libertarian who was a free speech absolutist.
Yeah, but also the kind of politics he ran though, um, his personal conduct, I guess, was questionable, right? When he would go after people on Twitter for no reason, like just like shitty behavior,
Yeah,
like
he
the
did a
Leslie
lot of shitty
Jones
behavior.
situation, and like Liana Kersner, for instance, was
Yeah,
was
sure.
he was just a
Do you
dick to
think? Do
people
you
for no
think? Do you
reason.
think? Do you think Milo is alone in doing that?
No, I
Like,
think I
do you
think,
not
but
think that
I don't
same
support
behavior?
other people who do that stuff too, though.
Right, but why does that make him a fascist?
I didn't say he was a fascist. I say he's a Christian nationalist.
Okay, but why do people say he's a fascist? They
Well,
did. You
Christian
decided.
nationalism, at that point, I would like you're
We're talking
basically
10 years ago. We're talking 10
okay.
years ago.
10
Yeah.
years ago. I think because 10 years ago people were they would exaggerate to try and smear their political opponents.
Exactly. So you asked, why do people call me a fascist? Because people exaggerate to smear their political opponents.
What did you think of the What did you think of the Gamergate people engaging in advertiser boycotts, like Operation Disrespectful Nod?
Thought it was great. How you do it?
Do you have any thoughts
I
on
mean,
deep freeze? Oh, no, sorry, you have more to say about the advertiser boycotts?
yeah, I mean, I thought it was really smart. That was, the gamers were really, really intelligent about how they approached Gamergate and how they fought back. And that was one of the most effective tactics they did. It put the fear of God into a lot of companies.
You say the gamers. Do you think that the progressive people on like Gamer Gazi, for instance, do you think that they're not gamers or they wouldn't identify as gamers?
I mean, they might be gamers. If they identify as gamers, then, I'm happy to treat them as gamers. As I said, I define a gamer as someone who's an enthusiast for gaming. When I say the gamers, I mean specifically the people that were being targeted as being that gamers are dead. That group, the people that they were saying is dead.
Do you have any thoughts on deep freeze?
Is that like they tried to make an archive of people or something?
Well, an archive of ethical issues in the industry. Um, for instance, I'm pretty sure like the Escapist, I'm sure is on here. Yeah, it is. So, for instance, some of your writers actually are on here too. Though you guys actually, I'll say this because I was around back then. I know you actually took ethics, it seemed pretty seriously, and I didn't really have an
Yeah,
issue
we
with you for
did.
the most part. I actually liked the Escapist.
We did take ethics pretty seriously.
Yeah.
We always did.
But have you
I
been to
mean,
the
I'll give
website?
you I'll give you a great example of the escapist, right? So everybody always talks about like advertising and editorial and what happens, right? I'll give you a true story. So we are running the escapist, and uh, we were supposed to get a big ad buy from Activision for its new game, and it's like they're going to do a full page takeover, sponsorships, everything. And then at the last minute, Activision pulls out and says, we're not going to do this because we've realized that the escapist will always cover our games anyway because it has to, because we're Activision, and your gamers will buy our games because they're core gamers. And so we don't need to spend money to reach your audience. So we're going to go spend it on these other websites. And they said this. They said this to my sales guy, right? It was a good friend of mine. Very blunt, very open. It's like, okay, no problem. Um, and so following year came along, and it was time for their next big release. And they had the gall to ask me. They came to me and they said, "Hey, we're thinking about doing an ad spend on The Escapist. Can you please send us your editorial calendar for how you intend to cover our games and what scores you'll be giving them?"
Ooh.
So I sent them a blank Word document. It's a really nice document. It said Escapist, editorial calendar, Activision games, dates, had our logo, and then it was just 20 pages of blank.
Was this sort of thing common in the industry?
Yes.
How many
Oh yeah. I mean,
companies?
when I was an ad buyer, it was so corrupt that some of the articles that were posted about the games that I was the marketer for, I wrote. Like I would just write the article and send it to IGN, and they would post it. And you could purchase page placement unmarked, not as sponsored content, just literally like it's just right there, and there's your article.
Do you think it was
It's
ethical to work in a position like this?
that's a good question. So I would say, uh, as a small business person at the time in a very tough industry, at that period of my career, I did not have much opportunity to be able to worry about ethics. I was trying to keep my friends and employed and my company afloat, and I did what I had to do.
In
So no,
August,
so I would say no, it was unethical. I don't think what my agency did was any more unethical than what all the other agencies were doing. And if we had not done that, then we would have materially harmed our clients because it was a pay-to-play environment, and we would have therefore then had no clients. It's not much dissimilar to where a record label was during the payola era of radio.
so did it, you would send these things out, being like, "Hey, look, how are you going to review our games? And maybe we'll buy the ads." Um, did
No, no,
companies?
I did that wasn't what we did.
Okay,
What
but
we
that's what
did
happened
was
to
we would
you at
say
one point. So they tried to do that
that's
to
what
you.
happened to me. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Do you know of
No,
any?
you
Go ahead.
the review scores. So review scores were actually always fairly objective, even at the worst of the industry. I wouldn't say totally objective. Like there's been very careful studies showing that like certain games always get higher scores, et cetera. But for the most part, it was hard to directly influence a review score. But what you could influence was like how much your articles showed up on the front page, how many articles got written about you, that kind of thing.
To your knowledge, do you know of any instances where companies, Kotaku, IGN, whoever, anybody, your other people, your successors at the Escapist, anybody like that, who did take these deals?
Which deals?
These deals to certain promote certain games or give them certain um, higher scores,
I
let's
mean,
say, or anything like that.
when I was a buyer, 2001 to 2005, everybody did.
Like
It was
the
just
Kane and Lynch
it,
controversy, 2007 with GameSpot.
mm, oh, that was a little bit different again because that was about a review score, as I recall. No, I'm talking about like the way it used to work is on the front pages of IGN and GameSpot, they would have they had them they called them gumballs. Where basically they were like these little windows because this was early 2000s web design is very different than today's web design. They would have these little windows which would be the feature story of the day. You'd have the big headline, big image, and then you'd have a whole bunch of these gumballs. And the gumballs were for sale.
So they would basically you'd get front page placement on the page to promote the
Yeah,
game, but it wouldn't necessarily be like you have to give it a 10 out of 10 or a 7 out of
correct.
7 or whatever, right?
Correct. Correct. You could not, no matter how much you spent, you weren't really going to change the score. Or if there was a number that changed the score on a review, it was a number far beyond any number I ever saw. Because I was mostly working with smaller tier
But would
games.
they say certain things instead of others? Like
Yeah,
that little blurb would be like would be presumably they wouldn't give you the money if you made it negative, yes? Or would
right,
they?
exactly. Um, so what would happen would be, for instance, you would talk to the buyer and you'd be like, I want to buy this gumball. And then they would say, okay, well, the editorial team says they don't have any coverage plan, so what do you want us to do with the gumball? And so then I would write like a press release or something like that that was relevant to our interests. And then I would send it over, and then they would have one of the journalists would, do a little bit of editing work on one of the press releases to turn it into an article, and it would go live. Yeah, again, I don't want to single out game companies as particularly, or game media as particularly unethical in this regard, because this is absolutely standard across all media. The vast majority of content that you read is influenced by press release and PR agencies, often entirely prepackaged and delivered to these companies. Like the the whatever you think about the lack of ethics in journalism, it's worse.
So Michael Koretsky organized. So I'll just read the whole thing, I guess. In August 2015, Michael Koretsky, a regional director for the Society of Professional Journalists, hosted the SPJ AirPlay conference. The idea of the conference was to have journalistic ethics experts meet with Gamergate supporters to discuss their concerns about games journalism and the way the media covered Gamergate. The second half of the conference was interrupted by bomb threats, forcing the convention center to be evacuated. Do you have any thoughts on this event?
I would ask who would call in bomb threats against an event like that, and what would be their motivation for doing so?
It's a good question to ask. Though there were also third-party trolls who just wanted to fuck with people too, so it could have been them as well.
Well, who was the other person if it wasn't the third-party trolls?
Anti-Gamergate. Well, or like theoretically, you could have a pro-Gamergate person who wanted to false flag it, right? Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, and you can't tell, right? Like the lesson there is we shouldn't rush to judgment on these things because false flags do happen, third-party trolls happen. People just like to stir the shit sometimes. So I think the conference was a good idea. I supported their effort, but I'm not surprised that it got disrupted. I I saw that happen over and over and over again with everything we tried to do when I was running Milo Inc. Everything got disrupted. We in the 6 months that I worked there, we never once managed to actually have an event.
so the Escapists, to my recollection, did not cover AirPlay.
Um, so what happened there? This is interesting. Sorry, itch. So what happened there was after the debacle of the gamers are dead, and then people leaving, and all of this stuff. Um, Defy Media sent down word to me, and they're like, "You guys are too political. Shut the fuck up." And that was that. So word came down from on high. Stop talking about anything related to politics, anything related to Gamergate. Just don't say anything about it. And that was that.
You did hire Lizzie Finnegan and some other people as well, though, or at least just her, maybe. But Brandon Morris, I don't know if Brandon Morris was pro Gamergate though. He might have been neutral. Um, but Lizzie was definitely pro GG. You hired her.
Yeah, we
Was that
did, but
before that
that doesn't mean she.
decision came in, or
That was before that decision, but she didn't talk about Gamergate very much. No one did after that. After that went down.
do you feel like
I mean,
caving to that
if nothing
pressure?
else, like say again.
Do you think caving? No, go ahead and finish your point. Then I'll ask.
Caving to that pressure? No, I wasn't caving to pressure. I'm a professional. I was hired on a salary to run a website for a corporation that has a particular media strategy, and my job is to implement that strategy. If I don't want to do that strategy, I should quit. At the time, I didn't want to quit, so therefore, I implemented the strategy they gave me. No caving to pressure. I was fucking doing my job.
Well, Kotaku's operating under a media strategy of telling their people to lie about Gamergate, telling them to lie about the Sweet Baby Inc. controversy.
Yeah, and the people who have a problem with that should quit.
But you don't think that those people that the correct thing for them to well, but if you so you don't have an issue then ethically with being told don't cover the story anymore?
No, not really. I mean, like, it's their website. I sold it to them. They own it. Why would I have an issue with them saying we don't want this website that we own to do this thing that we don't want it to do?
Well, journalism, like if you're telling you not to cover certain stories, like you said before, like about the Activision Blizzard thing, like I think that's already like a with Jim Sterling, I think that's already like really questionable in my view. But like, okay, let's say your entire
I think
business
that's
model is
man. If you think that's really questionable, you're naive, right? Like that's nothing.
well,
I am telling you, it is so much more corrupt than you can possibly fathom.
but you supposedly want to be the change in the world and stop that. That's why you took
I
this
didn't.
ethical line.
I never said I wanted to be the change in the world. I'm not an agent of change. Um, I took an ethical position because uh, the ethics I implemented were the ethics that I believed in. I don't believe that any given media website is obligated to cover a story if their owners don't want it to cover that story.
Well, you would presumably take great umbrage with this if this was like ABC News or the New York Times, right?
I take umbrage with the hypocrisy of saying that they will cover it. Like, if someone asked me, and we said it openly, we're not talking about these issues anymore because corporate said not to.
I would view that as very very concerning
Why? You
because
think that that's not. So, wait, so let me see if I understand correctly. Let's say you start a website, okay? You start a website, and it pays your bills, pays the bills of all your employees, pays your mortgage. You've put your life savings into this website, okay? and you have one of your employees is going off the rails and making what you believe to be unjust and unfair accusations against your biggest advertiser. You don't agree with what he's saying. You think it's false. He genuinely thinks it's true. Are you telling me that you should not have the power to tell him to shut the fuck up?
Well,
I think that's
presumably
crazy.
there
You
would
can't
be
run a
some
business
way
that
to
way.
evaluate whether or not these claims were true, right? If he
I
thinks they're
No, no,
true, he
no.
should be able
It's
to present
opinion.
evidence. And if he's
It's
got the
opinion.
evidence, then yeah, run
It's
with it.
you think so. So you would go ahead and destroy your website for that.
I think
You wouldn't tell him
I think your reputation's what matters as a journalist. I think it's what should matter at least. I
you're
think
not
that
a journalist in this example.
well, you're a
You're
media
owning a web.
company, yeah, right? So like if the New York Times, if it turns out that they like knew that 9/11 was an inside job and they hid it all this time, like that would
Hmm.
destroy them. They'd be crushed. They'd be
No,
over.
it wouldn't.
Yeah, it
No.
would. Especially if it came out shortly after, which of course, if it was a story that big, it would have to, right? Because you can't keep that hidden for
All
too
that
long.
Sure you could, and if it came out, all that would happen is the same thing that happened when we learned about Project Mockingbird and the fact that the CIA had infiltrated all of the major media companies.
Oh,
Absolutely
that was
nothing.
in the Cold War. That was decades ago. And that was a major scandal, right? That was they had
9/11
they
it
had
wasn't a major
the church healing.
it
Yeah,
wasn't a, it
they had entire congressional
wasn't a
hearings
major
on this.
scandal. No one cares.
What do you mean? Like
And
they
9/11
reformed
was
the
decades ago.
entire intelligence community basically because of this stuff. Because of the hearings in the 70s, right? Like was it the church committee or there was like there
They
were
claimed they claimed they reformed it, but actually they did not.
well they
The
released all
intelligence
of that
community
information like the
Judaism.
family jewels to the public, right?
They didn't release all that information. A massive amount of the information was never released.
Well, there I
They
think there
released
was some
some.
that wasn't, but most of it was.
They did a limited hangout until the controversy died down.
Okay.
Man, you have a much rosier view of the world than I do.
Maybe.
Wow,
Do you have
way
any?
rosier.
Did you watch the Safe Point panel at South by Southwest?
No,
Okay.
as I said, I'm not paying attention to this stuff anymore.
Yeah, you probably haven't seen the. What do you think of the Kunkel Awards? Actually, that's relating to your field.
I don't know what those are.
Of, you move on. Well, actually, no. Let's talk about that because that's something. That's what Koretsky and Lynn Walsh and the Society of Professional Journalists after AirPlay they made the Kunkel Awards because they wanted to reward good games journalism
Hmm.
by having by basically having an award ceremony that promotes the best work in the field
Hmm.
and creates positive incentives.
Okay,
I think that's a good idea. I think it's great, and I think
great. I think it's awesome.
I
Fully
biased
supported.
your answer because I said that I think it's great. I should have let you answer
No, no. I
first.
mean, I fully support it. I think it's great. I think awards for excellence are wonderful. Let me give you another example, man, just so you get an idea of what it's really like out there, right? Star Citizen. Okay, so the Escapist, we did an article on Star Citizen.
Oh
When we
yes.
did that
Oh,
article, okay, now when we did that article, we had access to insiders. I personally verified that they were who they said they were. Me personally, as the highest ranking person on the team, and they were speaking under condition of confidentiality. And we ran that story. And you know what happened? We got sued in the United Kingdom by Star Citizen for running that story. And I told my bosses, I said, we should fight back. We are absolutely in the right. All of these people, all of our sources have said they're willing to come forward if they're deposed, and they will speak publicly about all of these matters. And we will win this case. We will validate our reputation uh, as a game journalist website. And corporate said, "No, we don't want to spend money on that. Just take the article down and write an apology." And I said, "No, I will not write an apology." I said, "I will take the article down if you order me to, but I am not going to pen an apology under my name. If you want that, then I will quit." And they said, "Okay, okay, okay. You don't have to write an apology. Take the article down." So we took the article down, and our reputation was smeared through the mud over that,
well, your
over a
reputation
story.
should be spewed because you shouldn't have taken the article down, in my opinion.
It's not wasn't my website.
Yeah. Well, you could threaten to resign.
I mean, I threatened to resign on the issue that was personally to me. You know, like people have jobs, man. People have wives. I mean, my wife was disabled and sick. I needed the health care. Like, it's just not that easy.
You don't think that if you, as a principled journalist, decided to leave and then publish the story anyway on your own website or whatever, and start a new company or whatever it is you decide to do with it, however you decide to approach that, you don't think that you could build a new career off of this? Because right,
No.
you've proven your bona fides. The public trusts you because you did the
What's the
right
name
thing.
of Yacht? No, they don't trust me. The public just thinks I'm still lying
Well, you did
because I
lie
still
when you
can't. I
when you took the
still.
article down, right?
I didn't lie. I just took the article down. Not a
It's not a
lie.
lie. It's dishonest though, because you knew it was true.
Why is it? Why is it dishonest? So okay. So honesty requires that I say everything that is true. I don't agree with that.
Well, you didn't stand up for the truth, I should say at least. So actually, do you know what happened the other day? I'm
Oh, let
not.
me ask you something. What's the name of Yahtzee's new show?
I don't. I never watched him before. So
What's the
zero
name of Yacht? But what
punctuation.
was it? What?
He's with Second
Yeah,
Wind. I
yeah.
don't know
So,
what
no,
the.
no, no. You know, no, no, exactly. You know his old show by name. What's the name of his new show? You don't know. I bet
Yeah, I do.
nobody knows.
I know, but I don't watch his
Right?
content
And
though.
why? But oh, Yahtzee stood up for
But
integrity.
he no
Why aren't you
wait. I
watching?
don't think
Why aren't you
Yahtzee's
watching
doing bad
Yahtzee?
though. Wait. Didn't if I'm not mistaken, didn't when they broke off, didn't they end up getting like $10,000+ in monthly donations on Patreon or something like that? Didn't they
$10,000 for a team of six? No,
per month?
I
I
can't
think it
build on
was right. It
that.
was some huge. I don't know if it was exactly 10,000, but they. I remember.
Yahtzee, Yahtzee was making like 20K a month working at Defy.
Okay, maybe he takes a hit, but he's able to still support himself,
Is he? I mean, do you
presumably,
know
right?
that? Like,
Well,
I
look,
mean,
well, they're still
do you
going,
know
aren't they?
that?
They haven't failed, so
Are they?
yeah. Second Wind.
Are, I mean,
They,
are they
they
still
well, I know
going? I
because
don't
they
know.
they just had a controversy. They're involved with something right now where one of their editors actually um he got into a big fight with Mark Kern. I don't know all the details.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a he said she said. I haven't looked
Sure.
into it, but yeah, no, they're like literally this morning. The story dropped or 2 days ago or something. It was late
No,
yesterday.
I feel like you have you ever let me ask you, have you ever run a small business?
Well, I guess I'm doing this right, but
Yeah, but
no,
have you
I
ever
have
run
not.
a small
No.
business with employees where you're responsible for paying the bills, where if the company goes bankrupt, it's on your credit card and you lose your house? Have you ever done that?
Yeah.
Because it's really fucking easy to lay down these moral judgments about what people should and shouldn't do until you're in that position. And you're like, hey guys, I feel so strongly about this issue that you're all going to lose your jobs
I
and
mean, I
I'm going to lose my
already.
house.
I'm not sure if you've seen
Like,
much of my online content, but the way I operate, this isn't just like me and you. I'm like this with a lot of people. I'm a fighter.
no, I get it.
I
I
I
get it.
don't
You,
I
you can
don't
you can
I'm
be a
highly
fighter. I
independent.
just think
I
I,
don't.
I think you're misguided in your criticism.
Okay.
I
Well,
mean,
that's
you're
fine. We can
welcome to
disagree.
criticize
Like
me. I think you're highly misguided in your criticism here
because well, which specific part?
because you are applying journalistic ethics to business, and business is not journalism. Journalism is journalism. Business is business. They're not the same.
But journalism is a business now,
No,
to a large extent.
media is a business. Journalism is a practice within media.
So what do you not think that they should what do you think should happen with companies like this? Do you think that they should be allowed to do what happened to you, for instance? Not allowed, like legally, I guess they have the right to, but
Of course, they
like
should be allowed. Yeah.
clearly there should be some sort of social consequence, right? For them telling you to take the article down when they know it's true.
I mean, what should the social consequence be?
Well, that their reputation is severely damaged, right?
I was under an NDA, so even if I quit, I couldn't say anything about it. Couldn't do anything with the article because of a non-compete that I signed. So
Well, we
what
should probably reform the laws to make sure that they can't do that. If they're engaging in corrupt behavior, um, that
I
that
mean,
sh-
is that corrupt behavior?
yeah.
They're being threatened with a lawsuit. They don't necessarily have the money to fight a lawsuit. They don't know they're going to win. They're
Okay,
taking it
look
on
at that.
my
Someone in chat saying $54,000 a month for Second
Okay,
Wind.
that's
Let's
great.
look it up. Let's look it up and verify.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome then. I'm happy for them. I'm happy for them. It's well deserved. I have no idea what they're up to. I don't think that
Yeah, it's
most people that
fifty-four
I don't
thousand
think that
five
most
hundred
people
twenty
who
dollars.
strike off on their own are that successful.
But so
I mean,
that's an example of them
if
clearly.
being a whistleblower was so rewarding, way more people would be whistleblowers. The vast majority of whistleblowers just get fucked.
I don't know. I'd have to look at the stats on that. But well, would you have the stats on that? And like, what do you mean like
I mean,
whistleblower? Like we'd have to look at like presumably like there's a we'd have to look at like what specific field,
wait
right?
a
You're
minute.
talking about.
Why do we have to look at it when I make that assertion? You made the assertion that anyone who was a whistleblower would be super rewarded and
Well,
everybody would
okay.
follow them.
I
And I'm
I
saying
don't
no, I
know
don't think that's
if
how it plays
well
out.
that did happen with Yahtzee.
It happened with Yahtzee. Yahtzee did great. I'm happy for him. It's well deserved.
But I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe they wouldn't. But I don't know. I don't know how many other examples do you know of people specifically like doing something like this, like taking the stand and then being punished or rewarded for it.
I mean, I have many, many friends in various communities that have been punished for their openness on their various stances.
Like political views or like
Mostly
editorial
political,
stances.
yeah.
Okay.
Mostly political, but I mean, ties into editorial.
Do you want to talk about the artistic freedom stuff at all?
I mean, I'm an artistic freedom absolutist, so what is it that you want to ask about?
Well, there's a whole section in the book about this, the book interview. I guess we'll just ask. This is not directly related to artistic freedom because like you could both hold the view that artistic freedom is good and hold the view that video games cause or promote sexist attitudes or reinforce them. But do you think there's any legitimacy to that argument about video games reinforcing or promoting uh, real-world sexist attitudes?
No, I don't.
So do you want to explain why you don't think that's true?
Um, because I've played many, many video games and haven't seen any evidence of it.
Well, do you think that there's any validity to like the because like there, what so let's steel man that argument, right? So they would say someone who would hold that view would say that everything that we interact with in the world to some extent can influence our thoughts, right? Whether that's a book you read, a movie you watch,
Sure.
a video game you play, and that one way that people could theoretically be influenced is in a more sexist direction.
Okay.
So playing the game could influence you to adopt a more sexist attitude in the world.
Well, why are we singling out video games? It's just a true statement about
Well,
the
they
world. Like, there's nothing particular
right,
about
but they
video
would say the
games.
same thing about like movies and books too, right? Presumably.
Why would they? I don't know. I guess, yeah.
But well, what do you think? Do you think it's true that they can influence people to some extent? I think that
Oh,
to
of
some
course.
extent is
I mean,
doing
no, no,
a
no,
lot of
no.
heavy lifting.
Of course, people can absolutely be influenced by media. I mean, if they weren't, then the powers that be wouldn't spend so much effort on media, right? Like, obviously, propaganda works. That's why propaganda exists because it's so effective. Um, my question is, as a creator, do I have a moral obligation to concern myself with whether or not what I create will have an impact on people? And I don't think that an artist does. I think the moral responsibility comes with the consumer to decide what they want to consume. If John Norman wants to write the gore books about BDSM, then John Norman can write the gore books about BDSM. I don't read them, but he's welcome to write them. If reading his books influences people to try out BDSM, okay, then they try out BDSM. They're consenting adults. They can do what they want. I take this stance on pretty much everything. As I said, I'm a libertarian. And I think maybe that might be why you don't understand my morality, because I'm a libertarian. As a libertarian, your contract is sacred. If you are working for someone, if you have a contract with that person to run their company the way they tell you, then your job, your morality is to run that company the way they tell you. If you don't want to do that, you should never have taken the job in the first place.
What do you
Right?
think that contracts? Good.
If I didn't want to listen what Defy Media said, then I should never have sold my company to Defy Media.
So contracts. Do you think that? Well, you yourself said that these are not neutral things, right? That this company has more power than you in the world, that you were
So
barely scraping by.
I
Do you,
wasn't barely scraping by. I'm just saying I needed the job. I was never barely scraping by.
okay. So yeah, you needed the job. Clearly, the
Oh, okay.
employer has a
I
certain.
should change that. I was never scraping by during the time period I worked for Defy. I was well paid. I absolutely was scraping by 2000, 2001, 2002 when it was a tiny little business. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So anyway, let's
But
just to clarify that.
should there? do you believe like in unlimited contract power essentially, like that you could enter into any contract with anything without any sort of like legal stipulations on it?
I wouldn't say unlimited, and I would put it on a sliding scale based on the extent to which the contract has actually been negotiated versus just is being imposed on you. So, for instance, in law, there's a concept called a contract of adhesion. Here would be an example. Let's say you buy a book, and when you open up the book, it says, by reading this license, you agree that your house is now the property of the publisher. And you're like, what? What? That's bullshit. And obviously, no court would enforce that.
Mhm.
Okay. On the other hand, we have the opposite, where a company sits down and says, we're going to invest $50 million into your company. In exchange, we want you to sign this non compete, this non disclosure. You agree to report to the board of directors. You'll follow the mandates that the board lays down. Your lawyer talks to their lawyer and you negotiate it, right? So these are two very different situations. And so the rules that should apply to those two very different situations would be different. I think a highly paid executive is absolutely should be bound to his contract the way a samurai was bound to his daimyo, because he's effectively the same thing. He's a samurai for hire, and he's being really well compensated for it. I do not think that Joe consumer who buys a product with a grossly unfair shrink wrap license that should never have been enforceable, I don't think that should be enforced now. So in that, I part from the anarcho-capitalists and the Rothbardians who do take the stance that all of those contracts should be permitted.
Do you so so you're a borderline ANCAP or minarchist, I guess you would say, or what would you call yourself?
Oh, I'm on the minarchist side. I'm definitely not an ANCAP.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
So
not far off. I'm not far off from classical liberal.
I don't think it's. I mean, I disagree with anarcho-capitalism. I don't think that's like a good way to structure society. But like, I don't like.
No, I used anarcho-capitalism when I was writing a dystopian role-playing game. I mean, it leads to dystopia. The core problem, the core error of libertarianism, as it's classically construed, is that it believes that uh, people that work in government are evil, but people who work in business are good. But it's the same people. It's just a different .com versus .gov email address, and it's a revolving door. And so if the accumulation of power in government leads to evil, then we should not at all be surprised if the accumulation of power in business leads to evil. And the goal should be actually to just avoid consolidation of power.
Well, we're about to move into the politics section. I do want to talk. Wait, what? Do you want to talk about? Do you have any thoughts on localization
Um,
of
Not
games?
really, no.
Okay. All
Yeah, I
right.
don't play a lot. I don't play a lot of Japanese imported games. I know it's a really big deal for a lot of people because they get frustrated by like changes made for the United States or whatever. Um, and I totally get why that would be frustrating.
Oh, we're about to move into politics. I suspect this will be a spicy discussion. Do you need a break? Grab a drink of water, hit the restroom, anything like that?
Yeah, I'll take a break.
Okay. All right. See you in 5.
Yeah. right, I'm back. I've replenished my coffee supply.
Same. Well, I didn't like the coffee thing, but
Where
um,
where are you that it is still sunny outside?
St. Louis.
Really? It's 7:30 there? It's still
Yeah.
sunny?
Well,
Why is it not?
it's like it looks. I look out the window. Well, it's the blinds are out, but still, it doesn't look super sunny. But then you look at the screen, and on the screen it looks way sunnier than it actually is.
Yeah, it looks super sunny on the screen. Yeah.
It's so weird. Anyway, uh, all right. So I do want to ask you some contract rights questions, but like we can get to
Okay.
that later, because I fucked. So because we took the break, and I also asked you the creative freedom thing about the localization, I kind of fucked up a good video segment that would have been made, based on
Oh,
that section.
okay.
So we can like revisit it, and then, or how do you want to do it? I don't care.
Let's just revisit it.
Okay. So contract rights. Um,
Yeah.
do you think that they can be exploitative? Contracts can be exploitative?
Oh, yeah. Can contracts be exploited? Absolutely. Yeah.
Should the state play some sort of role in trying to mitigate this?
Yes. All right. Let me give you an example. So, at one time, property law was more or less governed entirely by contract law. Okay. Now, I want you to imagine what it would be like to be a rentor if the contracts for renting an apartment were similar to the contracts for using Instagram. Right. So, uh, we can terminate it at will. When we terminate it, you have to leave the apartment immediately. All of your possessions belong to us, and we don't have to return them to you. Right? Which is what Instagram says. We can terminate you at any time, and when you do, you lose all your content. You can't export it, you can't take it. There's no appeal, and if you want to sue us, you have to go into arbitration. Right? That's like the Instagram terms of service. That's the YouTube terms of all of these terms of services. Imagine what a dystopian hellscape it would be if landlords had that much power over us, right? Like that was the situation we had in the Middle Ages when peasants were effectively the slaves of lords. They were reduced to serfdom. When people talk about neo-feudalism, that late stage capitalism is beginning to look like neo-feudalism, it's because we have neglected these historical lessons and we've essentially empowered these platforms to have neo-feudalistic powers over our online existence. So absolutely contracts can be exploitative. But that doesn't mean that every contract is exploitative. It doesn't. The issue is not with the idea of contract. The issue is with the exploitation.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm very pro capitalism. Um, but I presume like so you mentioned the landlord thing. Would you expand this
Yeah.
to like employee areas too? Like for instance, paid holidays, 40-hour work week, overtime pay, things like this. But these are things the government
So
should be able to
I mean, well,
mandate.
it certainly has and has in many ways. I don't have as much of an issue with those things as many libertarians do. I used to when I was younger. I was much more of a fire burner, anarcho-cap. I don't really have an issue with those things anymore because what I've seen is that accumulation of power within corporations is just as evil and terrible as accumulation of power within government. And there's this political philosopher named James Burnham who wrote a book called Machiavellians, the Defenders of Freedom. And what he argues is that freedom arises when every powerful actor is checked by another powerful actor. So he talks about the fact that in the Middle Ages, you had the kings fighting the nobles, fighting the church, and freedom occurs in the gaps created by each of those factions needing to be able to appeal to different groups. And so because they're in a quote war for power, they need to have people on their side, so they're more generous. Whereas if they had absolute power, they would not be generous at all. They would be totalitarian and tyrannical. So I think the ideal society would be one that has many states which have lots of power, with many counties which have lots of power, with many little boroughs that have lots of power. Um, all the way down subsidiarity to the lowest levels. And likewise, we should have lots and lots of corporations and lots of partnerships rather than one federal government running everything, five major corporations running everything. That's terrible. It's a terrible outcome for society.
Do you think that the federal government has a role to play in the world or should exist?
Yeah, I do. Of course. I've consulted to the federal government. I consulted to the Department of Defense a few times.
Should that roll? Oh
I'm
wait, am I not on cam? Oh no.
oh
Okay,
no.
I'm looking at the. It's delayed. I had it. Okay, never mind. Cool. Um, should they have a role to play in things like space exploration?
Yeah, I think so. I think what we've seen is that capitalism is currently constructed, um, with rare exception of singular geniuses like Elon Musk, um, is oriented towards short-term profit, shareholder value, and that's about it. It's been entirely financialized and has been responsible for the hollowing out destruction of our country's manufacturing base. So I don't see any way to get back from where we are without government action and effect.
Wait. So the manufacturing. If you're like an anarcho-capitalist though, like,
I'm not an anarcho-capitalist.
sorry, a minarchist. Um, why would you care about like the man? Because like if you like that would result in because if you have a greater degree of economic freedom, companies are going to hire people in the developing world cheaper, which I don't have a problem with necessarily. But like that's going to result in like the offshoring of
Yep,
manufacturing.
but that's not why. That's not what happened. So what actually happened is that Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard and created the petrodollar. And the way that and he signed a security deal with Saudi Arabia. Kissinger went out, signed it, and under that, and this is all, by the way, in my book Running on Empty, which is available on Amazon. So Kissinger signs a security deal with Saudi Arabia. It says, Saudi Arabia, you will guarantee that OPEC only allows for oil transactions in dollars, and in exchange, we will guarantee the security of the Middle East. Saudi Arabia says, great. And so now the dollar, which had lost massive amounts of value, all of a sudden is necessary all around the world. Why? Because everybody needs oil, so therefore everybody needs dollars. What happens because of the petrodollar system? Well, several things flow from that. First off, the United States now no longer needs to export goods. Any country normally that imports more than its exports begins to run into problems because people don't want their currency, and so their currency starts to become devalued. But now everybody needs our currency all the time. And so the United States' chief export actually becomes the dollar. And this is why we do all of this outsourcing. We ship all of our manufacturing overseas because countries, according to the laws of competition, tend to specialize in the areas where they have a comparative advantage. And we had a comparative advantage in printing money that no other country had. Second, it puts us into constant wars in the Middle East to defend the petrodollar. It's why we have to take out Gaddafi. It's why we have to take out Hussein. It's why we dislike
I
Iran.
don't think we did that because of the petrodollar.
You would be wrong.
No, I think we invaded Iraq because Bush really wanted to invade Iraq because he had because his well a whole bunch of different reasons, but like one, they actually believed the intelligence to some extent because of the Office of Special Plans they created and stuff.
Okay.
What
I
do you
mean, we
just?
could have a 2 hour argument about that. I think you're wrong. I think the petrodollar has been the driving force of U.S. geopolitics for 30, 40 years.
But like we're not
So,
like fighting in the Middle East anymore. Like we don't care about the Middle East at all, pretty much. I
uh,
I don't think that they're as essential
maybe
to
you
our
haven't been paying. Maybe
foreign
you haven't been
policy.
paying attention to current event. Wow. Okay.
Well, you mean
You need
you're
to
talking
read
about
my
Israel
book.
Palestine? Like we support
No, no,
Israel
no,
for
no,
like a
no. No, no, no. Maybe I've been paying attention to current events, but the United States is currently losing the petrodollar, and we're being de-dollarized, and sort of the globe is de-dollarizing, and it's causing inflation in the United States, and that inflation is going to get much, much worse as the petrodollar system collapses.
you think that
So anyway,
we
so
you don't think it's
the
COVID that the COVID is what caused inflation, and then like
no,
also to some extent the government spending so much in response to COVID.
government spending certainly causes inflation. Rather, money creation causes inflation. But for a very long time, we were able to avoid inflation by what we would do is petrodollar recycling, where people needed dollars in order to purchase oil, and then that would come back into our economy in the purchase of treasury bonds and assets and created asset inflation rather than consumer price inflation. Now we're having consumer price inflation, which we have not had since the 70s, since the petrodollar system was put in place. mean, it is my opinion, and I say this as a man who wrote a book on the topic, like I literally wrote a book on this topic, that you cannot understand American economics and foreign policy unless you grasp the implications of the petrodollar system, which is an evil system, which has committed us to evil causes.
What do you think of Ukraine?
I think it's a tragedy. I mean, it's World War I level casualties over there. It's a fucking bloodletting. I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime.
Do you think the United States should be involved to any extent?
No.
You don't think it's in the United States' interest to support a free and democratic sovereign Ukraine and to check Russian aggression?
I, I think it would have been in the United States' interest to befriend Russia when we had the opportunity because they were our best chance for a strategic partner against China. And instead, we've pushed Russia into bed with China, which will be considered the greatest geostrategic error of the 21st century, mark my words.
What time period do you think that the United States should have befriended Russia?
I think we could have done it anywhere from close of the Cold War up until circa 2013 or so.
Well, I mean, Russia chose the path that they took, right? They decided to invade Georgia. They decided to invade Ukraine, both in 2014 and then now, right? Like, the United States didn't force them to do these things.
The United States, when the Cold War ended, guaranteed Russia that we would not advance NATO eastward. That was the
I
deal.
don't think that that's true. I don't think that we ever
No, it is
certainly.
true.
I don't. No, I don't think that
It's
that.
actually no. It's
I don't think
come
it's
out like you can.
established. I don't think it's
It is
established.
established.
No, I think that you have.
You
I
can
think you have
literally. I've seen it.
politicians. I think you have some politicians who wanted that to happen. And you have other politicians who didn't.
All right,
And
we're
then
gonna have
if you want
to.
to have a treaty,
We're gonna
you
have
can.
to agree to
But
disagree, like
also
because
remember, Russia signed the Budapest Memorandum to guarantee this the territorial integrity of Ukraine. They didn't.
listen, I'm not saying that Russia is some great good guy. They're not. Russia's a bad guy.
But
What I'm
Russia
saying is we're
themselves don't
also
even.
bad guys.
Wait. Putin himself doesn't even say that the war is over NATO expansion. He says that it's over the several thousand year of Russian history. Like you saw the Tucker Carlson interview, right?
I
He
did.
spends the whole time talking about how the whole reason he wants to do it is because he wants to restore the glorious Russian Empire. Like that's what he says basically, right?
No, he absolutely
That's
wants
his
to restore
motivation.
the
Like
glorious
that's
Russian
why he wants to
Empire.
do
Yeah,
this.
absolutely.
But like, so it's like
But that
it's
doesn't.
not
But that
NATO
doesn't
that
mean
caused
that.
him to invade Ukraine.
Yes, it is in part. Absolutely, it is. Russia has always, historically, always, its entire geostrategy has always been that it wants to have a very large buffer between itself and its enemies. And the moment we said Ukraine is going to go to NATO, that takes away their entire buffer. It goes against everything they've ever believed in.
Ukraine's a
It was
sovereign country. They can choose their own future.
Ukraine was victimized by a color revolution that we instigated that toppled their
What, the
government.
Euromaidan?
Yeah, we're not the good guys here.
We didn't.
We're bad
Wait,
guys. They're bad guys
what's your
too.
evidence that the CIA or other intelligence operatives created Euromaidan? I've actually interviewed one of the revolutionaries, by the way.
Great. I mean, there is plenty of evidence for it. It's been written about. I've written about it on my blog. Like, we're supposed to be talking about Gamergate, so like you'll forgive me if I don't
Well, you want to talk about like
delve
race and
into
IQ, you're willing to go there, but we talk about Ukraine.
what? No, I wasn't willing to talk about race and IQ. I
No?
specifically said I'm an individualist who
Okay.
measures
Okay.
people by their individual
Okay.
basis.
All right. We can
I
go back.
mean,
Look, this is a Gamergate book interview. But
no,
you
no. I
know,
mean, you
we can go to
like you're
Gamergate
gonna
if you
if
want. But
you're asking me my opinion on things. I'm trying to tell it to you, and you're telling me things that I know to be true to be false. So like,
okay.
what's the point of discussion?
Okay.
Am I going to persuade you? No. Are you going to persuade me? No.
I
If you
mean,
don't want to
like,
hear what I have to say, let's talk about other stuff.
okay. Well, okay. Well, what do you want to say about Russia and Ukraine? Any final thoughts? I'll let you get the last word in.
It's a tragedy, and the United States made a major geostrategic error in the early 2000s and late 90s when it had an opportunity to make alliance with Russia. We would be far better off had we done that because now we have China and Russia teamed up, and Russia has the resources and food that China needs. China has the industry that Russia needs, and we've created a superpower competitor to ourselves. And it was stupid. That's what I have to say on that.
Some critics have argued that Gamergate was mostly or entirely right wing. Do you think that was accurate?
I mean, it depends on your definition of right wing. I don't think that the majority of the gamers consider themselves right wing. I would say the majority consider themselves left libertarian.
Do you want to talk about your political views or philosophy? That is on the question list, by the way.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I've talked about it. My political views are complex and nuanced. I used to be a hardcore Randian libertarian, like full-on objectivist. I mean, I've written about recently why I no longer consider myself a Randian objectivist in pure form. And I've written about why I no longer consider myself a pure libertarian, and it's largely because of a wake-up call that as evil as government can be, corporations can be equally evil. So now I would consider myself a person who opposes consolidation of power.
I'm against the consolidation of power as well. Have your politics changed since Gamergate or due to Gamergate?
Yeah, they've definitely changed since Gamergate. I mean, among other things. So uh, at the time of Gamergate, for instance, I was a hardcore free trader. Like literally, like one of my online handles that I used, I think it was on AOL Messenger, was free trade, right? Free trader 2002. Since then, I've come to a deeper understanding of economics, and I've come to realize that free trade is not the unmitigated good I thought it was. So I've now moved away from that. So an ANCAP or Minarchist, strictly speaking, would be entirely pro free trade. I am not. I think that let's say like the '70s union movement, which had its criticisms of free trade, actually had really good points that were overlooked. What's bizarre is that that is now considered a right-wing view rather than a left-wing view, when historically speaking, free trade has been the right-wing view and protectionism has been the left-wing view. But now, like, all these axes are flipped, which is why, like, when someone asks me, was Gamergate right-wing? I don't know, man. All the
What
axes are flipped.
was like free trade like even like I don't know if it like maps onto like right left. Because like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
union
it
like
definitely did.
unions promote like protectionism and they're like left wing, and then you also have
Yeah.
like nativist groups that promote it too because and they're right wing. Like it seems like it's something that crosses the political spectrum. I think both for
Actually,
support and opposition.
to an extent, but a lot of the nativist groups were left-wing in their day. Like, if you go back and you look at Woodrow Wilson's politics, like, you know, very progressive, but he was also heavily affiliated with like the Ku Klux
Yeah, he's
Klan,
not a
et
good
cetera, et
guy.
cetera. Not a good guy.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's as clear cut as that. I think, but I would say overall, 70, 80% in historically, protectionism has been a left wing cause. Not 100%, but nothing is.
So why do you think free
Anyway,
trade's
so
bad? Oh, sorry,
that
go
would
ahead.
be one example of something that's changed. Why do I think free trade's bad? So the entirety of free trade was based on Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage, right? Which says, for instance, that even if England is better at making both wool and wine, it can still benefit from trade with Portugal because Portugal has a slight. Portugal is better at making wine than it is in making wool. So it can specialize in wine, and there can still be gains from trade with England. But Ricardo's entire theory had a couple assumptions on it that have since proven untrue. One is that neither labor nor capital were mobile, right? If labor and capital are mobile, then comparative advantage goes away and absolute advantage dominates. So if all the Portuguese investors are like, well, rather than investigate and specializing in wine in Portugal, we'll just send our money to England and we'll just invest in English wine, then comparative advantage doesn't work. The second thing that Ricardo neglects is that there are
Wait, I
pathway
just
dependencies.
I'd ask why doesn't that work? We can get to pathway dependencies too. I don't want to tuck you there, but um, why would the comparative advantage go away when the
Because the
Portuguese
comparative
invest in
advantage,
Britain?
because then they're not investing in Portugal and the comparative advantage of Portugal.
But like we don't care about like what an individual company does necessarily, right? Like the individual investors can invest however they want to invest.
That's why comparative advantage doesn't work anymore, right?
But they still have an advantage, and well, it would depend on like what exactly they're investing in, right? They could invest in anything in another country, right? I just don't understand necessarily where how what goes away. I'm not an
Okay,
economist, by the way. I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm
sure,
just
sure. Okay, sure, sure. Okay. So there's a difference between absolute advantage and comparative advantage. Okay. So absolute advantage means England is better at making wool than Portugal is better at making wool, right? England is better at making wine than Portugal is at making wine. So every unit of labor spent in England will produce more wool and more wine than it will in Portugal. Full stop. Okay. So if you wanted to absolutely just maximize production in the absence of decreasing returns, from, say, overuse of land or something like that. In the absence of decreasing returns, you would maximize production by shipping all labor and capital to England because it has a double absolute advantage. What comparative advantage says is that um, is that Portugal has a disadvantage in making wool, but it has a less disadvantage in making wine. And since we can't move our labor and capital, what should happen is that the labor and capital should invest in the wine in Portugal, and the labor and capital should invest in the wool in England, where they each have their greatest comparative or relative advantage,
Hmm.
and then they can trade with each other. And the math, if you do the math, it works out that everyone is better off. But the math only works if you can't move the labor and the capital from Portugal to England. Nowadays, you can. And so comparative advantage doesn't work. But comparative advantage, and you can verify this, is the basis for the entire argument for free trade.
Well, it's that the that yes the so the but it reduces the cost of the goods because you're manufacturing them in the country, or it improves the quality or some other effect, right? In the country that has the advantage, right? They have some sort of advantage, right? That would give them make it more advantageous to make the product there than another country.
Right. And so
But then
that
they
so
sell
that
it
so
to the
the
other country at a lower cost because of
and
that.
how
Or
does that country buy it?
well, they buy it because they have a different sector.
But they don't in this case, in this example. Right? In this example, Portugal is worse at everything.
But like, is that true though?
I mean, it is absolutely true. Yeah.
Like the United
Yeah. I mean,
States, I
that
don't.
happens a lot. Yeah, no, that's totally happening to the United States. That's why we import more than we export, and we have such a huge imbalance in the two, right? And what do we do to make up the difference? We print money and we send money offshore. And why do people need the money? Because they need it to buy oil.
I don't know enough about all this stuff, so. And you said there was a pathways one as well. The second
Yeah,
point.
path dependency. I mean, and this is such a no-brainer. I mean, any gamer will get it, right? Like, let's say you're playing Civilization, you've got a technology tree. If you go down one technology tree, it's really great, and then some other technology trees aren't as good for your nation, right? As an example. Um, same with everything. If you start off investing in wool, it turns out investing in wool was the pathway to the Industrial Revolution because it led to the spinning machines and the weaving machines, which then led to the water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Next thing you know, Britain is an industrial powerhouse. Whereas wine is basically made the same as it was in the 1700s with very, very minor increase in productivity. So one group got to go down a path of massive um, technological advancement, and the other got stuck in a stagnant industry because of its comparative advantage at that given moment. And so the argument, and this is all in a book which you can read called Free Trade Doesn't Work. It's available on Amazon. Great book. Ian Fletcher is the author. So the lesson is that every productive country in the world has always started with protection to protect its industries in key sectors and has maintained that protection with tariffs throughout. And this is now becoming increasingly recognized by US policymakers who are starting to implement protection
Well, I think
with
that that's
tariffs.
bad though. I think that
Okay.
I think that investing in certain sectors of the economy is potentially good, like the CHIPS Act, for instance, right? Building up semiconducting manufacturing in the United States. I think that certain areas, yes, we do need to have a domestic manufacturing base. I think that's good, but I don't think that like generally tariffs are good because I think that they're a tax on our citizens. And I think that most of the economists hold that view, right?
Um, I mean, yes and no. Yes and no. Most economists until recently have been part of the neoclassical school and the Keynesian school, and they definitely agree with you. But the entire American School of Economics, which was Alexander Hamilton through Frederick Least, which was the school of economics that was implemented in Japan and South Korea, most of the Asian tigers, they strongly disagree, for instance. So,
Well, wait, Japan and South Korea, like they invested in like their domestic industry significantly.
hmm
I don't know if like the tariffs necessarily make them good though. Like
well,
there's a difference between like creating taxes, like creating tariffs that your citizens
hmm
like have to pay for goods that are imported
hmm
versus using government investment to build up certain sectors of the economy. Like for
where does
instance,
the
like
government where does the government get the money to do the investment? The government has to take the money from its citizens one way or another. So
sure,
the
but
question is,
but they're actually building something in that case with it.
yeah, which is
They're
great.
building new industries.
Fantastic. That's part of the American School of Economics. That's exactly what everyone from Alexander Hamilton to Friedrich List recommended you should do.
Who are the
You should
big
use it.
good?
You should use a. What they would argue is that government needs to have some sort of source of funds. The best source of funds is tariffs because it protects your industry while raising funds, and then you use those funds to invest in infrastructure. That was the American School of Economics that we followed all the way up until the 1920s.
Who are there big economists that have changed their mind on the free trade stuff in recent years?
There have been, in fact, there was a Nobel Prize winner who came out recently. His name escapes me, but if you Google it, Nobel Prize winner of free trade, like you'll see he issues this huge mea culpa.
Are you okay with gaming sites criticizing games through a political or religious lens, such as a Marxist, feminist? Oh, we actually already asked that question earlier.
I mean, I'm okay with anybody doing anything they want. It's their website. They're welcome to do what they want. I don't have to read it. They don't have to cater to me.
Some people say that Gamergate was the quote first battle of the culture war unquote. Do you have any thoughts on that framing?
Uh, no, it's completely wrong. It was not at all the first battle of the culture war. It was simply the first battle where um, the uh, the up until then continuously losing team actually scored a few points. That's all.
Well, what do you think like were the battles before that?
I mean, take or like culturally speaking.
Well, yeah, and like the current culture war. Or I don't know if this is like even still like the current culture war, but
I mean, the culture war has been going on since the 1960s. You know, it's the long march through the institutions. So, you know, the takeover first they took over the education departments, then they've taken over the social science departments of the universities. Now most of the campuses are all much more left wing than they were 50 years ago. You know, the slow takeover of the media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, that's what I mean when I talk about the culture war.
who's they?
Progressives, you know, very highly successful, highly intelligent, committed progressives who've changed the world to a place they like better. Of
Can you define like what the progressive, like what their ideology or belief system is?
course. Oh, okay. I mean, you actually want me to do so?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Yeah. Progressivism is the belief that all criteria of inequality are wrong except for the criteria of commitment to progressivism.
Wait, that's self-referential though. What do you mean?
It is. It is. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. So, for instance, um, it if I am a progressive and I have an advantage over someone because of my race, because of my intelligence, because of my sex, because of the amount of money I have, I'm in the wrong, right? I'm of the oppressor class, and I should denounce what I have, and I should try and create a more equal and more just society. The only place where that doesn't apply is in terms of one's commitment to progressivism, which is the basis by which we should evaluate people. That is to say, progressives do argue for total equality, but they don't argue that you should treat people who are highly committed progressive activists and people who are reactionary Republicans the same. They think you should praise the highly committed progressives and criticize and condemn the reactionaries, right? So the only exception to the egalitarian is they are not egalitarian with regard to commitment to progressivism itself.
What percentage of the population do you think hold this view?
What percentage do I think actively hold that view? Fewer than 10%.
I think that's right. I think, well, if you're familiar with the Hidden Tribe study?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's a 10% that hits, you know, that bats well above its weight class. It's highly
That's true.
influential.
I agree.
Yeah,
Though I think they're actually on the decline, very much so.
I think they are on the decline right now. Yeah, I would agree with that. I've seen that. A lot of issues that were completely verboten are now being widely discussed. You know, the narrative have changed, the Overton window shifted. Yeah, I think they're losing ground right now.
I think that the Israel-Palestine stuff hurt them really bad too, recently.
You think so?
Well, yeah, because I think having people like Hamas Piker come out and be like pro Houthi pirates attacking civilian merchant ships and stuff, I think they way crossed the line. I
Yeah,
think that a lot of people
that's been
saw. You go ahead.
honestly, that's been a really interesting development, right? Because historically, Jewish Americans have tended to lean left in in sort of the political parties that they support. But the strongest support for Israel actually comes from Christian evangelicals on the right, and the strongest criticism of Israel currently comes from essentially elite leftists. And
Well,
so
yeah, leftists, yeah.
we get this really weird situation now. So it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be really interesting if Jewish Americans begin to line up with Republicans who support Israel versus the Democrats that they've traditionally been aligned with. Like that would be a sea change in American politics with very unpredictable implications.
Though it's also like Biden is very pro-Israel. Well, he's taking like the right approach, I think, which is like to be like moderately pro-Israel. He's actually maybe
I would agree with that.
yeah,
He's much less pro-Israel than Trump. Trump is being
yeah.
very pro-Israel.
Well, Trump's like playing both sides though too. I believe he tweeted out something the other day. Like he was like, fuck, I don't remember what it was. I should say. But I thought he tweeted out something that was like critical of Biden's policy on it, but like in a pro-Palestine direction, strangely. Um,
Huh.
but I
I mean,
think
that
he was
wouldn't
just trying to.
surprise me.
I think he was just trying to play to get like the pro-Palestine people to hate him. But I don't have it, so I'll just throw it out the window because I don't have it. I can't source it. Um,
Listen, if you're trying to tell me that Trump is inconsistent, I believe you.
but what do you think of like the new like the right wing like Candace Owens? You got the Nazi guy who I'm not even gonna say his name. Nick, right? You know his last name.
Oh, Nick
Um,
Fuentes?
yeah. Well, it's I don't know if YouTube like cares. You can talk about him, I think, but because Destiny talks about him, right, all the time. But like you got people like that, Andrew Tate coming in. They're all very much anti-Israel too. So like you've got this weird segment of the right that
That's true.
hates them, and you also have like this weird segment of the left that hates them. Um,
Yeah. Well, there's always been a segment of the right that's hated
true.
Israel and hated Jewish people in general, right? Like that's been around for a really long time.
Oh, true.
What's
Yeah.
more in, what's more interesting is that there's such a large group on the left now, and I think that's I don't think that it specifically was ever intended as anti-Semitism. I think it's an outgrowth of the argument in favor of post-colonialism, um,
Yeah, I agree.
and so
Well,
it
and
kind of
like the
belongs
white
to both.
supremacy stuff too, right? Because they
And
think
the white
Jews are
supremacy
white,
stuff, yeah.
even though like if I'm not mistaken, let's pull up the demographics of Israel. Fuck. But I think most of them are like Mizrahi, right? They're not even
I
white.
thought so. I thought so. I thought that they were largely the more Middle Eastern group
Yeah, I thought
rather
so
than the
too.
Ashkenazi. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I don't know for sure. But anyway,
But even if
yeah.
they
So
were white, who gives a shit? Like that doesn't mean anything. Uh,
yeah. I mean, look, I consider that the Israel-Palestine is a politically insoluble crisis because there's so much hatred at this point now between the two factions. Um, and Israel's in a tough situation because, demographically speaking, it's becoming more and more outnumbered, and its technological advantages that it used to have in warfare are all being eroded by the rise of drone warfare, cheap drones. So, like, I am grateful every day that I am not the prime minister or commander in chief of Israel because they're in a really tough situation. I'm likewise grateful I don't live in Gaza because they're in a really tough situation. Like, it's a human tragedy.
yeah, I agree. It is a tragedy. What do you think of the West Bank settlements?
You mean the fact that the Israelis settled in the West Bank?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was probably unwise. So, but the people that did it were, believed. From what I understand, are largely religiously motivated and believe that they're resettling the Holy Land. So it's kind of difficult when two different groups both believe that it's their land and their holy land and their holiest temple and their holiest city. Like that's a
Yeah,
hard nut to
I think
crack.
they just have to like follow the law though, the international law, and like they, just like not like I get it sucks, that your religion like tells you that like oh this is my land, and then your religion says it's your land. I think you just need to have like secular law and be like, well, I don't care what your religion says.
Yeah, the problem with that is who enforces it,
Well,
and
nobody, right?
that's
Nobody, because the UN doesn't want to do it.
yeah,
Well, actually,
nobody
the UN
enforces
wants to. I
international
guess
law.
America doesn't want to, right? Because America's vetoing um,
Right.
stuff. But
But okay, but let's say UN didn't. Let's say America didn't veto it. Who's going to enforce it, right? Like
I
the
think you
armies of Europe are tiny.
peacekeepers.
Yeah. Who?
Well, do you think Israel's going to fight the whole world?
Well,
I
no,
think
I'm saying
Israel.
I
No,
don't.
I think Israel. So one of the things that like America supports Israel. I think one of the things that like that gives America is like certain leverage in Israeli politics, and I think that 100% that Israel, especially if America told them, hey, look, you got to go along with this UN peace deal. I think if America said that, they would do it. It would depend on the details, the specifics, right? If it was like, oh yeah, it's a one party state and you have to like live side by side with the Hamas fighters, you know, that's not going to happen. But if it was, hey, look, you got to pull back from the West Bank, yeah, they'll probably do it.
Hmm. I mean, you might be right. I suspect not, but you might be right. I don't have super strong feelings on
Yeah,
it.
I don't. I mean, like I could be wrong, right? But like I don't think that if the whole world, including America, told them, hey, look, we're going to send in the peacekeepers, don't kill the peacekeepers, I think they'd back off because they want to live in peace and security, right?
Oh, sorry. When I was saying who's going to enforce the peace, the point I was trying to make is that the vast majority of the Western world, sort of the free world, whatever you want to call it, has been hugely demilitarized. There's effectively no arms industry left in Europe. They're struggling to be able to help Ukraine. Their military, Germany is talking about the fact it might need to do conscription to rebuild its forces, et cetera. That's what I meant when I said who's going to enforce the peace if not the US. Like for the past 70 years, the United States has been Team America global police force. And now we're kind of overstretched and not wanting to do that anymore. And I don't see anybody with the power to step up, except maybe China is getting there. But then do we really want China to have the power to step up? That's probably not so good either. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think that the, the
it's an interesting
decline of the
world.
Pax Americana is going to be shit.
Yeah, I'm very pro America. I think, but it's well, it's. Are we moving into a multipolar world in your view?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think we're already in a multipolar world. I mean, think about this, right? Um, we have a small third world country that the vast majority of Americans couldn't even find on a map, managed to shut down global trade through one of the most important channels of commerce on the planet and hit a US destroyer with a missile. And we have basically done nothing about it, right? Can you
What do you
imagine
mean?
that
Like we've been
happening?
bombing the fuck out of them.
Right. But airstrikes are cheap, you know.
Well,
Desert
we
when we
don't
did
want to do
Desert
boots on
Storm,
the
right?
ground because like nobody wants to do that. Because like, but it's a
Nobody wants
bad
to do that.
idea probably, right? That's why we don't want to do it.
Well, why is it a bad idea, right?
Because
Because
we don't want to
we
get
did boots.
dogged in this quagmire for 20 years like Afghanistan with Yemen, where nothing's gonna come of Yemen. Like, do you really think that Yemen's gonna turn into like a
Well,
vibrant
this
liberal
is my
democracy at
point,
the end of
right?
it?
Is we No, no, I don't. This is my point, right? And to be a hegemon, you have to be able to enforce your will globally, and we can no longer do that.
No, I think we can. I
We
think that. Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
I mean, I wish I saw evidence of that, but what I see is the last four times we've tried, it's as you say, it's been terrible quagmires that have been unproductive and destructive. Like, I don't like. Did we impose our will on
I think
Iraq? Did
we've
we impose our will
recognized.
on
I mean,
Afghanistan?
we kind of did in Iraq, right? Like the Iraq War was like, whether we like it or not, it was a success story. Like, it's not like as
The war,
great as we would have
the
liked.
early part of the war certainly was, but not
But
so much the aftermath.
well, in the sense that like the democratically elected government of Iraq like didn't do the things we wanted them to do. I guess that's like true, but like we did actually build a democracy there.
Right?
but but yeah, I think that we recognize that like going into these like nation building conquests in the Middle East are like a terrible idea, and like that's the right lesson to learn, I think, from Iraq and Afghanistan. Whereas I do think we are right. Right, we just did pass the Ukraine aid bill, which I wrote to my congressperson over and over again
Hmm.
to pressure Johnson to bring it to the floor, um, and they did. And I think that America, this is a war that only Russia could lose, right? They're the invading power, and I think that the United States has proven that it is capable of standing up for and protecting itself around the world. Now,
I mean, I
if
think it
Trump
used to be able to.
wins,
I don't.
it's all bets are off, right? Trump wins, we're fucked. I
Do
think.
you think so?
Oh yeah. Well, he's not gonna. He's gonna 100% pull out of Ukraine unless he gets a lot of pressure from the GOP not to. But I don't think that's gonna happen. I think some people in the GOP will pressure him, but I don't think enough will. Plus, I view Trump as being a fascist.
Using Trump as a fascist.
Yes, correct.
Do
Because
you
he
think
tried to
all
prevent the
populists?
peaceful transfer of power in the United States of America for the first time in American history.
Do you think all populists are fascists, or just him?
Not all populists necessarily, no. It depends on like what you're like. If you're anti-democratic, then yes, or close enough to
So
it.
your definition of a fascist is just someone who's opposed to democracy.
Well, opposed to like liberal democracy, not like a direct democracy. Like not like I'm not talking about Athens here, right?
No, I understand. So okay,
But like
just
so,
understanding
but like
how do you disengage?
communists are opposed to democracy too. They're a different kind of breed. But yeah, I'm opposed to them as well. Like tankies.
Yeah, Stalinists, etc. Yeah,
Sure, yeah.
sure.
Like you should see the interview I did with Peter Coffin, part two. We actually
Is
go
he a
over
communist?
communism.
You've
He
mentioned him. I don't know who he
he's a
is.
Marxist. I'm in the middle of interviewing him too. We're doing like a multi-part interview.
I
But
see.
we're yeah, he's a Marxist Leninist. Um,
I see.
but like again, I get along well with everybody. So
Sure.
I'll interview like you and I like we're having like a really good exchange. I feel. But of course,
Yeah.
my role as an interviewer, and we should I should probably go back to doing the interview stuff right now. But it is fun. Are you having fun?
Eh, I'm expecting I'm going to get a ton of hate and nasties after this, but that's all right.
Well, not from my community, I don't think, right?
No, not from your community. I wouldn't imagine.
Now, if somebody in my community does go after you in a harassment way, send me the evidence on it, and I'll make sure that doesn't happen.
Don't worry about it.
Um, what do you think of the framing of Gamergate being a response to a moral panic about video games?
So that's interesting. I do think there was a moral panic against video games, right? And unfortunately it primarily was driven by the right wing being really stupid about how they approach video gamers and alienating a lot of video gamers, and I hate that, right? Like I've had
Oh my gosh, is that better?
that's way better, yeah. I've had huge arguments with fellow right wingers about this, because like guys like Matt Walsh, et cetera, and they're just so anti video games, and I think it's moronic. But I don't think it caused GamerGate. I think it was like a separate issue. Because GamerGate, I think, was primarily driven as a left wing assault,
Well, you
whereas
could
the
call it a moral panic from like the left, right? In a couple of ways, right? You could say that the concern about these evil misogynist gamers is a moral panic, right?
okay, okay,
Or you could say that the concern about video games causing sexism was a moral panic. Or you could say that the people who were worried about the social justice warriors and were panicking and freaking out about them, that was a moral panic, right? You could like frame it three different ways
okay,
even, or maybe more.
okay. Yeah, I'm persuaded. That's a persuasive framing. I'm persuaded. Yeah, not a framing I would have made, but I can totally see where someone gets there.
James Desborough, who you talked about earlier, he actually we talked about that for him. His book, I think I haven't read it, but I've interviewed him. His I think he frames it mostly around those lenses.
I wouldn't be surprised by that. Yeah, I mean, James is a man of the left, but he's a man of the old left. Um, he's highly committed to values that are no longer as widely respected within the left. Free speech, things like that.
What do you think of
For
the framing of Gamergate as a battle between those who believe in classical liberal values like artistic freedom, free speech, and pluralism, and those who didn't?
100% believe in that. I think I touched on that earlier, but yeah, I mean, all those things I spoke of, like commitment to objective fact, belief in truth, like those were classical Enlightenment values that have been fundamental to Western society, and the opposition is kind of like a post-Enlightenment progressive postmodernism, and I think that is in fact it was a philosophical battle.
Well, you say that you think you're going to get a lot of flack for this. Well, one, let me ask why, and then two, I want to address that in a way that's like,
Oh man, I mean because my views are like freaking. I have a blue orange morality, right? So like I look at the world and people say all these things, and I'm just like, I think you're completely wrong, and you're not just like a little bit wrong. I think you're fractally wrong, so that no matter how much I zoom in, you're still going to be even more wrong. I don't mean you in particular. I just mean in general. So like, uh, so whatever I share my views, I just expect to be hated on for them.
well, obviously nobody should harass you or anything like that. But I do want to say this too. this is what should happen. We should have conversations. I so my big takeaway from Gamergate is a couple of things, right? Like one is the ethics
Yeah, yeah.
stuff. I think that living in an ethical world is important, but two, I think that the story of Gamergate, and maybe we might disagree at this exact framing, but you can shoot me down all you want. I don't care. Shoot me down at with it if you disagree. I think that the lesson of Gamergate is the lesson of like liberal democracy. That we need to build a pluralistic world, and we need to
Hmm.
learn to live with one another and tolerate different lifestyles and different stuff like and different people with different belief systems and different lifestyles too, right? Like I don't have a
Hmm.
problem with like progressive people, right? I don't have a problem with conservatives. I have a problem if they're illiberal. If they want to force their views on everyone else, then I take
Hmm.
umbrage. But like if
Right.
but one of the people I'm interviewing coming soon, you probably haven't seen it, but she made a really long video. Her name is Savvy Lizer. She made a super long video about Gamergate. It's like a six
Okay.
hour long video, and she's like super progressive in a lot of ways, um, but she's also pro free speech. And
Hmm.
so like if you want to like play woke games and you enjoy that sort of thing or progressive games, like go for it. Live that life. I don't care.
Yeah,
More
absolutely.
power to you. Um, and then like if you want to live if you want to play Christian games or run Christ Center Gamer, I interviewed Cheryl Gress, the founder of Christ Center
Hmm.
Gamer. Um, that's phenomenal, right? You can review games from a Christian lens, and if people want to, if you're a Christian and you're like, you know what, look, I don't want games that have, that gratuitous violence, or I don't want games that have a lot of sexy women in them, or whatever, right? Or
Right. Sure.
right, or sexy men, or whatever, right? If
I've,
you
I mean,
it,
I've had a number of Christians say that my content that I did in my comic book was too racy for their taste.
yeah, and that's
The
a
women were too
thousand
sexy.
percent fine, right? Now, if they say that's too racy for my taste, you gotta change it.
Right. Or
Then it's
that's too
a
racy
whole
for my taste. So therefore, I'm going to petition Kickstarter to take your Kickstarter down. Right.
Yeah, that's when it
Yeah.
crosses the line.
That's when
But
it
like
crosses the
I want
line.
to
I
live in a
agree.
world where all these people can, and I guess you do too, right? Because you're a libertarian. Um, we all want to.
Well, it goes back to my point earlier, right? Like, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
It goes back to my point earlier, right? Where like we've forgotten the lesson of the 30 Years' War, which is that if uh, if people start to take the point of view that their way is the only way, and there are sharp moral disagreements in the society, then it will lead to bloodshed and horror. Tolerance was tolerance. It wasn't like we just came up with it, like, hey, we should be tolerant, right? It was like earned in blood and battle and steel and trauma. We've just forgotten it. And we need to remember it because otherwise we're going to be on the path back to blood and trauma and horror, right? Like, what percentage of Americans now thinks that it's possible we'll have a civil war in their lifetime? Like, it was unthinkable in the
Hmm.
1980s that we ever would have had a civil war. 1990s. Nowadays, I go to Starbucks and I hear people talking about they're afraid of a civil war. We have movies about it might be happening. So, like, just even if even if you're the most committed progressive in the world, it seems to me you should want to have some pluralism in society, or the most committed libertarian or whatever, because otherwise the alternative is very, very nasty.
Yeah, and we can't continue down this current path. So
No,
my big
no, we can't.
project is to, well, I guess my big takeaway from the gamer is that we have to build a better, we have to learn a way to live with one another. We have to have that tolerance.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But am I not going to be living that value? Because,
What do you mean?
well, I guess this project is that, but after this project, um, I'm considering a few other things.
Hmm.
So one thing that I'm doing is, you're familiar with multi-user dungeons?
Yeah, of course.
So well, this is like going to happen soon-ish, but there's a multi-user dungeon convention in St. Louis,
Oh, awesome.
and I went last year, and it was really fun. Well, I don't even play the game really. I've played a little bit, but like they were fun
Wait a minute,
people to hang around with, and they
you're in
love
St. Louis?
alcohol too. Yeah.
Oh my God, I forgot. So one of my best friends from law school was one of your congressmen, Jake Zimmerman.
He's not my congressman, but or maybe he is. I don't know. I can't say that on
I don't know, but
on
yeah,
internet.
Jake Zimmerman.
But
Yeah. Anyway.
um, anyway, so so
Conference for Muds.
conference for Muds. So I'm gonna go this year, and I'm gonna interview
Hmm.
a bunch of the Mud people at the convention. Now they're a Mud for two different games specifically, Gemstone and Dragon Realms. Um,
Okay.
the blue the blue lanyard people versus the green lanyard people. They have like a friendly rivalry.
Okay. Okay, okay.
uh, but I'm gonna go in and interview a bunch of those people about like the mud scene and like their experiences with the game and stuff. So like, is that's not related to me like living my values necessarily, but I think it'll be like a fun part of history to document. Um,
Oh, I see what you're saying. I
so
see
like,
what you're
so
saying.
I'm focusing my energy on that project, and I'm also after that, I'm gonna be focusing probably I might do a so I don't want to get into the other thing yet, but we can if you want. But so me focusing my time and energy on that project. Now it's going to be relatively quick. I think I can knock the whole thing out in a few weeks. Um, probably even maybe even less. Um, for a book, I'm going to transcribe them into a book, the interviews, just like I'm
Yeah,
doing with this one right now. Um,
sure.
but like that's me spending time and energy on something that's not promoting the pluralistic world.
Yes, it is. But at the same time, the point of a pluralistic world is to enable a world where a man like you can spend his time and energy creating videos about something he really loves and writing books about things he really loves. So I think it would be like being a nutritionist who refuses to eat nutritional food because you need to spend all your time writing about nutrition. Like, no, you also need to eat nutritional food, right? Like, you want to live in a pluralistic world that can celebrate tons of different types of media. Absolutely advocate for that, but go ahead and also enjoy all the media. Like, I don't see any issue with what you're doing at all. I think it's great.
No, I
I
think
think it's
that
great. I listen, people that end up on a one track, right? Right? It's a bad place to be in the world. The most interesting people are the people that have really broad sets of hobbies where they're doing all sorts of different things. And they've got their political values. They've got, I don't know, they volunteered in animal shelter. They run a mud. Like, those are the most interesting people. Those are the best people, in my opinion.
that's a really great point. I'm glad you put that in perspective. Because like honestly, I feel like I'm at the point in my life where like maybe the mud thing's a really great break from it. Really, it is. Because like
Yeah.
I'm so focused on this project that it's eaten up so much of my free time, and then
Yep.
it's like my whole life, and it's like I don't have a life outside of it. And so I think
Right.
the mud thing really is a good distraction, I think, from it. Not a distraction, because like it is a fun, cool project. And like how
Right.
many other people in history have documented the stories of the people who play muds in the year 2024 or even
Right. Right.
recently?
Yeah. Oh my God. I grew up with muds, by the way. Like, I was college man. I was all about the muds.
Which ones did you play?
And the mushes. Oh God. I forget its name. It's so embarrassing. It was one of those mushes where it was like kind of dating focused, and I don't want to talk about it.
Oh no, was it one of the furry ones or no?
No,
Okay,
God,
okay, all right.
no,
Not that there's
no, no,
anything
God,
wrong
no.
with that, you know.
No, listen, I wear my shit on my sleeve. Like, if you purchase my comic book, you flip through it, you're like, okay, I know what this guy's into. You know, there's like that whole joke that amateur writers barely disguise their fetish in their books, and I'm like, professional writers put them on the cover.
That's base. I like that. So,
So,
what should I ask the mud people? Because I need to develop a question list for them. It's gonna be free form and then also questions,
oh
kind of like
man,
what we did, I guess.
why are you still playing MUDs in the world of MMOs? What are the advantages of MUDs? I mean, I'm so out of it. Like, are the MUDs today, are they still text based or have they switched over to voice chat and video?
Well, it's mostly text, but I mean, players can do voice. I don't know how common that is though, personally. Well, actually, you know what?
Right.
Fuck it. Let's just find out right now because I'm in their Discord server. How many people are in the voice channels? Wait, do they not have any? No shot. No
Right.
shot. I probably don't have access. I probably don't have like the perms or whatever to see them.
Right. Yeah, because so I found it's interesting. I played MMOs really heavily, starting in law school all the way through my mid 20s. And I found the switch from text to voice basically destroyed roleplay in the MMO. Because let me give an example, right? So let's say your buddy is playing, an ogre shaman, right? And so he could roleplay an ogre shaman when he was typing it. He would be, Grum says we must crush enemy or whatever, right? And you would hear it in a little funny voice in your head. Okay, but then all of a sudden, um, you go to voice chat and Grums has a Brooklyn or Long Island
Oh no, yeah.
accent and a high and a tenor
It's
voice, and
sometimes it's better not to know, right?
you're like, oh no, what have you done, Grums? Yeah, and so what happened is when we switched to voice, people, instead of playing their characters, they were just themselves, and it was like a party line chat, and it destroyed roleplay. So, like, to me, I would think the appeal of MUDs would be because they're still text, you can still have roleplay.
Well, you know what? Maybe it's not that I don't have the perms. Maybe they they do have voice channels, but nobody's in them right now. But there's also
Yeah,
people. They also sometimes have their own separate servers and stuff too. So like for like clans and stuff. So just because they're not in the official servers voice channel doesn't mean
yeah,
that. Yeah. But I bet a lot of them, and I'll have to ask them, right? Because like I don't know that much about this world. I've played a little bit, um,
yeah,
but I'll have to ask
yeah.
them because they're the experts,
The
really.
other, yeah. The other thing I really liked about MUDs was that nowadays, like we take for granted, oh, you can mod your games or whatever. But back in the day, you couldn't really do that. But with MUDs, many of them you could, right? Like you could actually add to the game world in really cool ways. Particularly if you got kind of senior in the community, and so there was a way of integrating your creativity into it, and then other people would go into your rooms and things. That was really fun.
Well, anything else you want to say about MUDs before we move on to the next section? Or
Looking forward
politics
to your
too. We're
documentary.
closing that one out too.
Looking forward to your documentary, man. On
Oh,
MUDs.
it's
It's gonna be
no,
awesome.
it's not a documentary. This is
Oh,
a
oh,
book, a compendium of interviews, basically. It's gonna be a multi-volume book of interviews.
it'll be good.
Thank you. Did you interact with any anti-Gamergate people?
Oh yeah. I mean, half my staff was anti-Gamergate. I interacted with them every day.
Did you ever change anyone's mind on Gamergate?
Not even once.
Really?
Yep.
Do you think that you've changed the minds of people who you don't know, like people who read your work or who are watching this interview right now or reading it in the book?
Maybe. So I have this theory. Okay, you mentioned the Overton window earlier, so you know what it is. So here's my theory. So you got your Overton window. And what I've noticed is that if someone says something that you initially disagree with, but they're an influential person, a person you respect, they make good points, and they say something that's not where you were, but it's within that Overton window, they might shift you towards them, right? But if that person says something that's outside your Overton window, then what happens is your Overton window doesn't shift. Instead, that person loses prestige and respect in your eyes. And a great example of this is J.K. Rowling, right? Because you would think that with J.K. Rowling taking a stance that she has taken this sort of radical feminist stance against trans ideology, you would think that the impact of that would have been for many of the fans of Potter to say, "Oh wow, I had never seen these points, J.K. Thanks so much for leading me to the light." But in fact, what they've done is said, "Oh, I hate you now," and and I'm not a fan of J.K. Rowling anymore. It's because it was outside their Overton window. So I suspect I probably moved some people who already sort of were in alignment with me on a lot of things, and then they were like, "Oh, okay, I see that." And I think a lot of other people, I just by sharing my views, all I did is make them lose respect for me.
Are you familiar with Destiny?
Not really. I mean, I hear his name a lot, but I couldn't pick the man out of a police lineup if my
Okay.
life depended on it.
Well, he's got a video just came out recently. He's been talking about this a lot lately, actually. But it's a video liberals versus everybody else. I'm sure you love the title. But he's talking about classical liberals.
Yeah, of
Um,
course, yeah.
and he's talking about he made a whole manifesto and he's still working on it too. But he goes over the manifesto in the video, and he's sort of talking about how he's come to the view that like a lot of people's it's a huge thing. But one
Hmm.
of the things he talks about in there is how a lot of people's politics seem to be based on um, their social dynamics and their perceived like social groups. And
Hmm.
he like doesn't he's trying to like figure out ways to like navigate this world and and like encourage people to think more critically beyond just that because he seems to think that for a lot of people it's not just about the truth, right? For a lot of people, humans aren't truth-seeking machines, he says. But for a lot
Correct.
of people, that it's well, I mean, I think am, but maybe
That
I'm a
makes
very
you
unique
unusual, though.
person,
Yeah,
though.
that makes you unusual. Yeah.
Yeah, but he thinks that social dynamics are basically the reason why people um, a lot of people like adopt the views that they hold, and they also adopt constellations of beliefs too. That it's like
Hmm.
you have, and they also link their beliefs together. He argues that
Hmm.
that it's like, okay, well, it's like it's not that necessarily like this. If this one point is linked to this other belief that I have, and so therefore I'm going to cling to this view, even if it turns out that it's not really that true, or the evidence for it's relatively weak. So I'm going to keep holding that because it's linked to this other thing that I find very important.
Right. Or which the group I belong to finds very important.
Yes,
And if I
true.
were to reject it, I would be rejected from the group. Yeah, I think he's 100% spot on. I mean, it's like, look, it's deep evolutionary psychology in the human being. Um, we evolved in small bands, right? Not even tribes, small bands of groups. It's the same reason why it's so stressful to ask someone out on a date, because the way we evolved, how many mating opportunities did a man have his entire life, right? 4, 5 women he was going to interact with, maybe 10 or 20 if he goes to a tribal meeting a couple of times a year, right? So when he gets rejected asking someone out, that's like 20% of his entire lifetime dating opportunity just vanished when she said no. And then we carry that with us, and then we ask out someone in the real world today, and and there's a gazillion people available online, but we're devastated because we get rejected, and it's just like, it's essentially faulty wiring from conditions that don't apply anymore. And I think the same thing is true with political beliefs, right? Like, if you didn't, like, imagine you were part of a band and you didn't agree with the band's taboos, you got kicked out of the band and then you died. So everyone who was tempted to be like, fuck your taboos, they got bred out of the gene pool, and the people who survived were the ones who were like, I love our tribe's taboos, this is great. So, like, I think destiny is 100% correct.
So what is to be done?
I don't know. When I was younger, I used to believe that everyone could be reached through reason and argument and debate, and I just no longer believe that. Aristotle in his book on rhetoric says that there are some people for whom logic cannot work, it won't reach them. And for them, you have to appeal to emotion or, good character or things like that. And I more and more find that that is a sad but real truth about the world. And so I think what has to happen is that the people that are best suited for that search for truth, for those conversational dialogues, like, those people need to make that really strong effort to build those dialogues, have those communications, set those standards for the society, and then hope that because of their elite position, the mainstream will adopt their views.
Right. I think that people living their values, I think, is important. But these are things that we can teach people. Like there are skills. Like I didn't like honestly like 2 years ago I wasn't like an honest person necessarily. I wasn't like
Yeah,
actively like lying necessarily, but I was a liar in the same sense that most people are liars. Um,
sure, sure.
I've adopted because I've read Sam Harris's book and I found it extraordinarily convincing. I made a decision in my life to be honest about everything pretty much, and sometimes the honest answers I don't want to fucking tell you, but um, but because I've adopted this honest approach, it's like this is a life skill that I've learned, and I also like
Right.
pluralism, this a hearing out and tolerance. Like that's a life skill that I've learned. Like we can teach people these things. These are not like these are learnable things. Um, so like we can encourage these in
I mean,
society. In
absolutely, but they're not learnable by everybody, just like calculus isn't learnable by everybody. And that's just an unfortunate state of the world. Like, I
is it
wish everybody could, but I think some people are not. But that's okay, right? It doesn't mean that they can't be part of society. They're just going to be the ones that are more oriented towards emotional arguments or sort of the group community focus, and we just have to sort of make sure our system works for them too.
how much of it do you think is social versus? Oh my God, we're supposed to be moving past politics. How much of it do you think is social though versus um, people having, or I guess they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but people having like certain predispositions, and you could say that those are like a mix of different things, right? It's a mix of social and environmental factors, plus like you could say like genetic factors. So you're probably more in that camp, right? Um, Correct me if I'm wrong, but like,
I would say for most things, it's somewhere between 30% and 70% genetics, right? So roughly overall, I'd say it's like 50% genetics, 50% environment is the outcome.
okay,
But where it gets tricky is that the environment can change what sort of genetics are most likely to be successful. And so then, and in turn, the masses of people with particular genetics can change the environment. So, for instance, like um, nowadays, uh, it is not particularly rewarding to be a Bronze Age warlord with a savage temper and a willingness to inflict bloody mayhem on anyone who crosses you. In fact, you probably end up in jail. Whereas, let's say, if you were an Indo European charioteer during the Yamanya period, that was probably a pretty adaptive trait. And so they conquered everybody they encountered, right? And so, like, I kind of think it's like this really complex feedback loop that's hard to untangle, right? Like, is Chinese culture are Chinese people more collectivist because their culture is more collectivist, or is their culture more collectivist because, for whatever reason, their genes are higher in agreeableness? I don't know the answer to that. I think that's a really interesting question, and I think there's a lot of really interesting work being done in that area.
Man, I had something really insightful I thought up, but I forgot it. Don't you
I
hate when
do
that
that all
happens?
the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I always tell myself, well, it must not have been that important then. But I think sometimes it is, and you just missed the
The word
opportunity.
the worst is when you have some brilliant idea and you're like, I can't wait to work on this tomorrow, and then tomorrow comes and you're like,
Oh yeah. Well, I don't have that feeling anymore because like I'm a fucking psycho workaholic. Have you seen my channel? I've released
you were
like
clearly
eight
you are
videos
a psycho workaholic. Yeah, no, I mean,
in the
you
past
were
like.
like you just I was like, how long is this going to be? And you're just dropping 4 hours like that's just something everybody does every
Well,
day.
we're 3 hours and 10 minutes right now. I've done 7 before. That was too much though. I
Wow.
shouldn't have done that. I hated that. Well, I
Wow.
liked it at the time, and then I hated it when Well, I'm going to hate it when I have to transcribe that into book format and then make clips
Oof.
out of it. I'm gonna hate that. I swear, I'm gonna hate that.
If you hold out long enough, the AI will transcribe it for you.
I've been using AI to help actually, because the
Yeah.
YouTube transcripts are garbage. You know, I don't. This is
Right.
boring content. We don't have to talk about this.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm starting to crash, so why don't
Okay,
we
okay.
wrap it up
Well, rapid fire,
wrap it up
rapid
in
fire.
15 minutes? Yeah.
Oh, dude, I still have like 50 questions left. Uh, real fast, rapid fire, rapid fire. Okay.
Rapid fire.
All right. What do you think of Not Your Shield?
Not Your Shield was when women and minorities would make posts to protest the use of their identities or by the game journalists. Is that correct?
Yes.
Um, yeah. So generally, I'm supportive of that. Like it's like I said earlier, I kind of think I think it's a little bit of a sickness to focus too much on group identities and use them as a club for social advantage or political advantage. I don't think it's a healthy way to frame society. And so I think the more we can stress that people are individuals, and that just because you're of X gender or X race or sexual orientation, um, doesn't mean you have to follow all of the stereotypes of that. So yeah, so I think Not Your Shield was good. I don't know how effective it was, but it was good.
Well, it did change at least one person's mind. A man in maroon who I interviewed, he says that changed his mind on Gamergate.
Well, there you go. That's great.
Um,
Good on them for being effective, and good on him for being open minded.
so some people say that Gamergate supported harassment. Do you think this is true?
I think Gamergate included harassment. That seems unquestionable. Like we all saw it on Twitter. What's unclear to me is to what extent the people that were committed to ethics and game journalism were engaged in harassment, or whether it was an affiliate group that saw an opportunity to cause grief to people they didn't like. How much of it was just third party trolls, and how much of it was false flags. And I would apply that on both sides of that equation. And I don't have good answers for that. And I don't think anyone does. And we should be pretty skeptical of of what we perceive online, because we know now so much of it is bots and false flags and fakes, etc. So, but yeah, there was absolutely harassment during Gamergate. It was horrible for everyone who experienced it. I don't know anyone who was like, "Man, this is such a good time. I just love going online now. This is great."
Well,
Like no one
I
felt
loved.
that
I
way.
had a great time with it, but I didn't. I got harassed myself too.
Did you really?
Yeah. Well,
Did you really? You had a good time?
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Man, I was an activist. Like every day, logging in, and like this was like the height of my. Well, it was the height of my life at the time because I was a dumb
Right.
fucking 20-year-old kid. But
Right.
now, like I feel like I'm a much better person, much more enlightened person, much
Right.
more. I'm happy with who I am today than I was back then.
Yeah. 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 I've never been one who enjoys that kind of interaction with others. Like I'm actually pretty agreeable, and for the most part, I just kind of do my own thing, and yeah. So I didn't enjoy it at all, but I'm glad at least you had a positive experience. Yeah,
What do you think of the media's coverage of Gamergate?
I think I. um, my answer to the question of what do you think of the media's coverage of anything is going to be it's basically terrible. Are you familiar with Michael Crichton's joke about Gelman amnesia?
Yes, you turn the page and then all of a sudden, oh, you forget that so you see the article, you think, oh, wait, that's wrong. I know a lot about this topic and they got this, this, and this wrong. But then you turn the page and you're like, oh, they're talking about Israel Palestine. That must be accurate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah. So having been on the inside and seen how the bread is baked, um, I would view all coverage from journalists with great skepticism.
Well, you should, right? You
Now,
should like examine their specific individual claims and like determine if they're true based on the evidence they present, right?
exactly, and this is where you made the point earlier that reputation matters, and I do think reputation matters a lot for a journalist. And over time, there are some journalists like if they make a claim that sounds outlandish to me, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt because they've been the man with the facts on prior go rounds. Whereas if it was just a random stranger on the internet, maybe you're a little more skeptical. So
Well, so building trust is important in your view.
for a journalist, for sure, yeah, and I think for a brand as a whole, yeah. Yeah. By the way, to be clear, I want to go back and say like a lot of the decisions that Defy Media made, I thought were wrong, both pragmatically, philosophically, uh, fiscally. And as I said, I told you as such. I was like, what are your company values? Failure. But at the end of the day, it wasn't my company. It was their company. And so I'm constrained and I feel so, um, and it's going to sound silly, but if you watch like the Shogun series, right? Like I very much felt as a corporate executive who had sold my company, I was working for these guys. I felt like a samurai who had sworn vassalage to this daimyo. And so basically my option was do what he says or commit seppuku. So
Have you
doesn't mean
seen?
I agreed with doesn't mean I
Ooh,
agree with everything they do, but like at the end of the day, you sign the contract. So
I want to ask you what you think of three body problem, but I feel like wasting this brief 15-minute rapid fire round by asking you about the show is like a bad question.
three body problem was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Have you read the books too?
Yeah,
Yeah, they're well. I
thought
don't
they
like
were. I
the
thought.
ending. No spoilers. I don't want to spoil the audience. Well, actually, you know what?
Oh,
We
okay,
both
okay.
seen it. Do you want to spoil it?
I haven't finished. We shouldn't spoil it. I haven't
Okay.
finished the book series. I'm only on book 2, so I haven't finished the book
Okay.
series.
Okay.
I read the first book, and now I'm going back to read the sequels because I saw the show.
Okay. All right. So yeah, yeah, the books are really good. I feel too, but the ending of the third one I wasn't a big fan of. But I'm not gonna say what.
My brother said the same thing actually. So yeah,
I wonder if they're gonna do it differently with the show.
I've girded my loins for disappointment. It can't be worse than Game of Thrones.
No, it's not that bad.
Yeah, that's like the gold standard for just completely botching the
And
landing.
it's like I wouldn't even say it was like a terrible ending. It's like it's not like it's terrible in the sense like it's bad writing. It's terrible in the sense that I like don't like it. I
Yeah,
disagree with the way they went with it. I understand
yeah,
what they wanted to do, and I can like appreciate that in some way. Like but I don't like it.
yeah.
Like that kind
The
of bad.
ending of the ending of R. Scott Baker's Aspect Emperor series did that to me. Like I understood what he was doing philosophically, but I hated it.
What do you think of the ending of Battlestar Galactica?
Um,
The new one, not
is
the
that
not
is
the
that when
new
they're
quote
like
unquote.
it ends up with them back at Earth,
And they,
and like Gaius and the blonde chick are spirits now. It's been a while.
uh, well, and they spoilers by the way, major
Yeah.
spoilers. They fly the fleet into the sun and they abandon all technology and go live as primitives.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. So I gave up on the series before the last season, so I only ever heard secondhand how it ended, and what I heard didn't inspire me to watch it. So,
Well, they didn't even
you
build
know,
up to that point either. you know,
though that said, nowadays I'm like, I look at some of the really toxic things that are happening because of technology, and I'm like, okay, actually, I kind of get it now in a way that I didn't. I'm probably a little more of a Luddite than I was 10, 15 years ago.
Well, they with the show. Do you mind if I spoil?
Oh, spoil away, bro.
Okay. Uh, so with Battlestar, the whole narrative was like, oh, we final this all this has happened before it happened again, right? So this war between the humans and the AI that they create happens over and over and over in all these different civilizations. Except at the very end of the show, they actually come together and find a way to coexist. But then they abandon all technology and go live as primitives. So all the lessons that they learned throughout the show about how they could actually build a successful civilization living together and coexisting, all that goes out the window, and then it ends with them on modern day Earth in the year 2004 or 7 or whatever the fuck it was, right?
Right.
Um,
At the time,
yeah,
yeah.
at the time, modern Earth, and it shows that humans are inventing AI, are on the verge of doing it, right? And they're gonna go destroy each other again, possibly. Well,
Right.
it doesn't hint at that because like it just shows that they're building AI. But
Right.
it's like, well, wait a second. You just learned this lesson and you threw it all away. So the whole lesson of the show was you can coexist, but then you gave that up and abandoned all technology. It's so dumb.
Yeah.
It doesn't even narratively make sense.
It doesn't narratively make sense. It's really dumb. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of the Gamergate Wikipedia article?
Oh, I don't read Wikipedia, man.
I only really want. I figured it was gonna be a really negative answer, but like I wanted to ask you because I wanted to get you like on the record saying that it was a bad article, or not. Like if you really liked it for some reason, I don't want to like bias your answers, but
I've literally
yeah.
never read it.
Well, because I think it's important to
I
document how bad the article is, and also like
Yeah.
apply pressure to Wikipedia to do something about it at some point. Um, what's your favorite video game?
Like of all time.
Yeah, or you can give a few if you want.
Yeah. So XCOM UFO Defense is really really high up there. The original Shogun Total War is really high up there. Asheron's Call, Star Wars Galaxies. Um, yeah, I would say those are my big four. Oh, and Master of Orion too.
I've never played the Master of Orion games. I've heard so many great things, especially the classics. I don't know about the new ones as much, but I've never played them.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that all those games have in common is that they all have multiple tiers where, like, for instance, in XCOM, you have the strategic tier where you're running your base, and then you have the tactical tier where you zoom in and do the battles. Shogun, you have the strategic tier where you're running your Japanese kingdom, and then you zoom in and you do the battles. In Star Wars Galaxies, they had this whole tier of building and construction where you could have cantinas and guild houses, and then you could go do the battles. I kind of love it when there's two layers going on in the game. In my own role-playing game, Adventure Conqueror King, is a two-layer game where you start off as an adventurer, but then eventually become a ruler, and then you're controlling things.
Now, do you play on the Galaxy private servers at all?
No, no, I haven't had time for MMOs in many years, so unfortunately, that just time of my life is behind me. Um, I think about getting back into it sometimes, but I just realize it takes so much free time to be good at them, and I hate to do things that I'm gonna suck at. So
Yeah, before I became a political live streamer, and then that was before I became working on this book project like 8 months ago. I played Final Fantasy 14.
hmm.
I loved it. Oh my! I was in a guild. My
Yep.
uncle and I would play together, and it was great. I loved it. I got to Heavensward, the first expansion. I just beat that. But then I started becoming a political live streamer, and like,
Uh,
which are you gonna do?
yep.
I picked
Yeah,
the
you
live
got to make
streaming.
choices. Yep, it's all
Yeah,
choices.
but like,
Yeah,
I'd
for
love to
me,
go back at some point.
oh yeah, they're great fun, and I imagine the new ones are awesome. My wife has a max level character with I think every skill shard in Elder Scrolls Online. It's her favorite game of all time, and she and I met actually talking about how much we both loved Oblivion, and like we were each trying to outdo each other with how many hours we'd spent into it. So like it's a gamer household here. I just haven't had as much time because I've been running a small business trying to stay afloat with my role playing game business. You know how it is,
I'll let you shout
workaholic.
yourself out at the end.
Yeah.
Are you still comfortable doing like another like 10 minutes?
Yeah, yeah, we can do 10 minutes, sure. You can tell my energy level's down though.
Yeah.
No, I warned you. My extroversion, I can only fake it for a few hours.
What was your favorite moment during Gamergate?
When it ended, I suppose. Um, I guess probably the coolest thing that happened to me during Gamergate was I actually became friends with Adam Baldwin, and we went out and had drinks together in Los Angeles, and that was pretty cool because I loved Firefly, and so it was like happened to be sitting down with this dude who had been the star, a star of one of my favorite shows, and then he also was totally based, and we talked about games and politics, and it was great. So that was my highlight,
It really is a
hanging
shame
out
it didn't get a
hanging out with
second
Adam
season.
Baldwin. Yeah, it is. It is. It was a great show.
If you could have changed one thing about Gamergate, what would it be?
I mean, it would be. I wish that our side hadn't engaged in any harassment. I think it really poisoned the well for the good things that that side was trying to achieve. So I wish that that had not happened. But given how it began, with like the whole uh, the drama and like the assertions of sexual this and sexual that, like the toxicity that started it was pretty fierce. So I understand why it happened, but that would be one thing I could change. I wish there hadn't been that.
For all of you watching, be sure to like the stream and leave a comment. I love comments, even if you disagree, especially if you disagree.
Don't comment if you disagree, unless you're disagreeing with him and you're agreeing with me. Then you should comment.
What would you have done? What would you personally have done differently during Gamergate?
I think I was way too reactive. I should have pulled the whole team together earlier on, and I should have gotten everybody on the same page or found out where people's opinions really were. And I should have gotten in touch with my boss sooner about the situation and the potential upside and downside, and with the general counsel about things that were going on. And because when it started, nobody thought it was a thing, right? Like it was one of those sort of spirals into absolute madness, and um, so I felt like the whole time I was always playing catch up to events that had occurred, rather than really sort of um, charting a forward path and steering the ship in a positive way. And I think that was a failure of leadership on my part.
Let's say it's 10 years from now, and an online
Mhm.
movement is looking to Gamergate for guidance for their movement. What advice do you have for them?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so Gamergate is an example of what's called leaderless resistance, um, which is so there's this whole theory of generations of war, where you have first generation of war, second generation. So the fourth generation of war is insurgency, built around resistance networks, and then the fifth generation of war is the dismantling of resistance networks, um, and use of propaganda and things like that to block fourth generation warfare. So then you have sixth generation warfare as leaderless resistance, where you cannot dismantle the network because the network doesn't have cells and it doesn't have leaders. It's a diffuse, uh, um, dynamic, spontaneous organization that's based around a shared belief structure, a shared set of agendas. And I think that is the future of ideological struggle. That's the future of culture war, is that leaderless resistance method. And Gamergate was one of the first to pioneer it that I've seen anyway. There might have been others, but at least the one I'm aware of.
What have you personally learned from Gamergate?
Yeah, that's a great one. To me, the big lesson I learned is that I had been foolishly mistaken to believe that just because I was a libertarian who believed in let live and let live, that others would reciprocate. And that, in fact, not only was there not reciprocity, but that people were willing to actively destroy the careers, the lives, the livelihood, the reputation of those who they had political disagreements with. And that was a really sad, brutal wake up call for me, because I had prided myself on the fact that in my office, we had Marxists, we had leftists, we had a guy who had the Palestine flag on the wall, we had a Jewish guy, we had a Christian guy, like, you know, um, and I always thought we had like a really great culture that had kind of transcended those things, and I was entirely wrong.
We're
It
almost
was
there.
it was disheartening.
That is disheartening. I'm sorry. That's unfortunate. Do you see parallels between Gamergate and the way society currently discusses issues?
Yes, yes. I mean, I think what we've seen since Gamergate is that you get, the harassment is everywhere now. Um, the toxicity is everywhere now. The culture war is much more in the open. It's being fought on every front. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I distinctly remember when Gamergate died down and we moved into the late 2010s. I was like, I'm glad that's behind us, and we can get back to America being Americans, and totally wrong. So
Have you ever thought about writing a book or other project relating to Gamergate?
no, 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 no. I don't. Like I said, I kind of moved on from that chapter in my life. It ended, it ended in a pretty heartbreaking way for me, and it's not something I really had given much thought to wanting to revisit. I mean, how many messages did you have to send me to convince me to do this? Like, I basically showed
Too
up
many.
kicking and screaming. So,
Well, you agreed pretty quick, but like actually scheduling you was the hard part.
yeah. Yeah.
Was Gamergate well? Are you okay? I know you want to go. Should I ask you?
If you got a couple more Gamergate specific questions, go ahead.
Um, uh, what would for you personally? What would Gamergate being successful look like, and was it successful? I'll combine the two questions into one.
Yeah. So, I actually laid out in an article on The Escapist what I thought the criteria for a happy outcome would be. And I likened the game industry to the car industry. And I said, in the car industry, everyone understands that middle-aged to older men are who buy Chevrolet Corvettes, and outdoor macho guys with army experience are who buy Jeep Wranglers, and moms are who buy Volvos. And the car industry makes a car for everybody, but they don't expect every car to be for everybody. And so the happy outcome that I wanted to see happen was that there would be games for everybody without the pressure of every game being for everybody. I think it should be the case that if a designer says, I'm actually making this game for teenage boys, and it's a teenage boy power fantasy, and all the girls have big boobs, and the guys have superpowers, and it's just the game I wanted to play when I was 13, fine, that's great. And who cares if it doesn't appeal to girls? It's not intended to appeal to girls. Likewise, if someone wants to make a game and say, we want to target 40-year-old soccer moms with 2 kids, and that's we want to play our game, and it's not for teenage boys or college students, fine, great, that's awesome. That's not the outcome we got.
If you, what do you think of this interview project?
Seems like a little bit of a madcap project, like really hard to pull off and must be requiring a lot of hours and effort. And I hope you end up, getting to the point where you get rewarded for all the work you're putting in, because it seems like a tremendous amount of work.
Thank you. Um, some
And
people,
as a man who wrote a 1,500 page tabletop role playing game in an industry where you get paid a few cents per word, I respect the Madcap project.
thank you. Um, some people reading this might hold a negative view of Gamergate. Do you have anything you want to say to these people?
I imagine what I've said has probably made their views more negative, so I'm just going to say I'm really sorry. I don't know.
Can you explain Gamergate to any cetaceans who might be reading or listening to this?
To any who?
Cetaceans.
What's a citation? Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm thinking citation as in a dictionary citation. Yeah, so what I would say is,
Okay, chat really wants me to ask about Zach Smith. Do you want to talk about that?
I mean,
I don't
not
know anything
really,
about
but
it.
you can ask. But yeah, Zach Smith was a guy who worked for me. He had a blog called D&D with Porn Stars. I messaged him once and was like, "Hey man, I love what you're doing. We should do a show on The Escapist. We'll fund a show." We called it "I Hit It With My Axe." He got all of his porn star friends. They filled themselves playing D&D. There was some raunchy talk, a lot of action, hot girls. It was one of the very first of the live play shows, similar to Critical Role, which became a much bigger hit down the road. Um, when I launched the show, I got a bunch of shit from right wingers who felt that I was glorifying pornography and promoting a reckless adult lifestyle. And I said, look, we're breaking stereotypes here, and we're showing that um, these girls that people think are just sex objects are actually pretty smart, and they enjoy Dungeons and Dragons, and I think that's a good thing. And if you don't like it, don't watch the show. Um, and and if you're one of my employees and you really don't like it, then don't work for me because this is what we're doing. So fast forward a couple years later, we hired this guy named Brandon Morris. Um, Zach Smith didn't like Brandon Morris. He felt Brandon Morris was a transphobe. I told Zach, I was like, look, Brandon Morris has nothing to do with your show. He's not working on your show. He's not involved in your show. He's just a dude who works for my organization. Um, and what you're saying to me is no different than what the other people said to me about your show when I hired you, which is that, oh, you can't do this because X. And I said, I'm going to tell you the same thing I told them. It's not how I work. Like, if you don't want to do it, then, let's not work together. And he said, I don't want to work together. And that was the end of our relationship.
Anything else you want to talk about?
No.
Okay.
No.
I did want to ask you about the dungeon drama shit, but you probably haven't followed that, have you? Grim Jim covered it.
Dungeon,
So
dungeon drama?
you'll be here for 10 years. I haven't even looked into it yet. Okay, it's a massive story, but I'll be respectful of your time. I don't even know anything about it. I said,
Okay. I mean, man, there's so much drama. I feel clueless. Like, you're asking me all these questions about things I don't know anything about. I feel clueless. I'm old. I'm almost 50 now.
well, hey, thanks for coming on. Do you want to shout yourself out? Where can people find you? Where can the people find your work?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Archon, Archon. You can find my political blog at treeofwoe.com. You can find my RPG blog at arbiterofworlds.com. I have several books on sale on Amazon, which include Arbiter of Worlds, a primer for game masters, as well as Running on Empty, a primer on the Petrodollar. You can find my games at autarchemporium.com, which is AutarchEmporium.com, Autarch Emporium, or on Drive Through RPG. My games are Adventurer, Conqueror, King System, and Ascendant.
And I did put a link to your Twitter and to your YouTube channel in the description. So people can check out your work if they want to. So check out the description if you want. And then also, everybody, of course, like the video, leave a comment. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I do need more subscribers, okay? All right. Thank you. Thank you for joining me, Alex. I
Thanks for having me on
appreciate
your
it.
show. Thank you.
Yeah, of
Of course.
course. And have a great night. Well, I guess we'll raid somebody real quick, and then you can stick around for a minute if you want, or you can head out. I'm gonna raid somebody, but YouTube is so slow. The studio, um, it had this problem last time too. It was so slow. It's like taking 10 years to
I'm,
load anything.
I'm going to bounce.
All right, thank you
Thank
for
you so
coming
much for
on.
having me on the show, man.
Of
Okay.
course.
Cheers.
All right, who we got to raid? It's just loaded up. We'll raid Stardust. We haven't talked to her in a while. Cool. Well, hey, have a good night, everybody. Check out Stardust, and